Ahead on American Sunrise Early Edition, a split decision in Wisconsin as a liberal judge, Susan Crawford, she wins the open state Supreme Court seat, but voters also approve voter ID laws. How did those two things happen at the same time? I will explain. Meanwhile, in Florida, the two special elections for vacated seats in the U.S. House of Representatives stay with the GOP. That gives the Republicans a 7-seat majority in the House, and every vote counts. Speaker Mike Johnson knows that all too well this morning. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the Justice Department will seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, accused of gunning down the CEO of United Healthcare in New York in December. But will going for the death penalty make it harder to convict him? And a guy who's already become a folk hero to the radical left, will they now care about him even more? It's Liberation Day, as the White House calls it, with tariffs now in effect. Perhaps more importantly, we know more of the details about just how high those tariffs are going to be. Wall Street is acting absolutely schizophrenic about this news every day. And Russia continues to do almost everything to undermine President Trump's efforts to broker a peace with Ukraine. Is peace even possible now, considering the history of this conflict on all sides? American Sunrise Early Edition starts now.
Welcome to American Sunrise Early Edition, the show where faith, freedom, and the values that built this nation take center stage.
Your good deeds and bad deeds, that's how we're going to judge you.
Join host Jake Novak as he breaks down the stories that matter.
We will be letting the public know regularly what we have found.
American Sunrise Early Edition with your host, Jake Novak, starts now.
Welcome to a Wednesday here on American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak here with you on Real America's Voice. Hey, and at least you didn't have to stay up too late last night for all those election results. Things were decided pretty early. And it seems like, again, I'm trying to take victories where we can take them. At least the votes were counted properly, I guess. Joining me right now is Colonel Rob Maness, U.S. Air Force retired colonel, the host of the Rob Maness Show. And first, Colonel, you've run for office. You know about these kinds of things. I want to get your reaction to last night's election results. I guess there's four things to talk about: the Wisconsin's court race, the voter ID law in Wisconsin, and of course the two races in Florida. Just your overall impressions of that mishmash, all those four together.
Well, it's great news out of Florida, although I didn't really expect that Randy Fine would lose. But, it's interesting. The quality of your candidate is always the most important piece to any election, regardless of endorsements. And I think that, it proves that. But it bodes well that we pulled that off and everything. And, the voter ID law passing in Wisconsin, I think, is fantastic. It's amazing. I know a lot of people are going to be confused. So how could they vote for the liberal judge and for voter ID at the same time? And I just think, the population of Wisconsin, the majority up there, they have a different way of thinking about this. Unfortunately, though, with that loss of the judgeship, we could lose 2 House seats very, very soon with redistricting. And that's exactly why the president pulled Elise Stefanik's nomination to the UN back, so we could maintain that slim majority.
Yeah, I mean, listen, President Trump won a clear majority in November, and it's great. Great news about those House seats in Florida. But again, we can't really delude ourselves. This is still a very heavily divided country, and I don't want to get into too much right now. We'll do it later in the program. But I have one word to explain that split vote in Wisconsin, with voter ID carrying by even more votes than Susan Crawford won for that seat. And the answer is one word: it's abortion. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the program. But Colonel, you're here to talk about our security situation in the world. And I want to talk first about these developments out of Russia just for the last few days. It really says now some really disturbing stuff, I think, if you really want peace. The Russians saying they really aren't going to accept the ceasefire terms as we have hammered them out, as the U.S. has hammered them out. And, it seems to me now like, it's now the ball's in our court, President Trump's court. I mean, he's already said a few days ago that he's very angry at Vladimir Putin and that he's ready to do some sanctioning about this. Where do we go from here?
Well, we've got to get them in the room, I think, and get the three principals in the room and see if we can hammer something out. It's from a Ukrainian perspective and Zelensky's perspective, if we could get him in the room and play to his ego just a little bit, that might bring him closer to being less intransigent than he has been. And I think that's part of what Putin, where he's coming from, more than likely. He's in the catbird seat, so to speak. His forces have reconstituted from their failures early in the campaign, and his production capability on the military-industrial side is up. His economy is, while it's weak, it's not as weak as the sanctions that the West has put on Russia have intended it to be. As a matter of fact, Germany spent more on fuel from Russia than they have on giving arms and support to Ukraine. I mean, that's a startling statistic to a lot of folks that have believed the narrative, the official narrative coming out from NATO, the West, and from Ukraine. But it's true, and it's just a fact. And I think that's why President Putin is behaving the way he is. He's behaving as if he's the country that's got the upper hand and continues to have the upper hand. And I don't think he's going to accept any kind of ceasefire on the ground portion until he's satisfied that the Ukrainians are going to accept reality. And the reality is, look, Jake, the reality is, as we've been saying for a couple of years now, that Russia pretty much has the Donbass area, those breakaway republics that voted to leave Ukraine that are Russian ethnic, the Crimea. They have those, and I don't think they're going to be willing to give them up because they've spent a lot of blood and treasure to take and occupy those and keep them. And unfortunately for Ukraine and the West, the Russian armed forces are grinding it out, the old Soviet style of ground combat, and they grind it up and move forward a few inches every day, and nobody's pushing them back.
Yeah, Colonel, this also comes, you can understand some of Russia's frustrations here. Again, I really think that they are generally the aggressor here, but we got this report that even the New York Times was willing to put out over the weekend, showing that under the Biden administration, the United States was much more involved in the Ukraine's war planning and war operations than previously reported. Now, we all suspected this. People like you and I were saying this was happening anyway, but for the New York Times to put this out, I think that really closes the book on any doubt about this. And, if you're sitting in Russia's position, sure, you're happy that Biden's gone and you have a better potential partner in Donald Trump. But, then I get the feeling like there's a little bit of revenge that's being exacted here on just the United States, even though there's new leadership. I wonder if you feel the same way.
I do feel the same way, and my response was, what took so long? Because we've been saying this, especially those of us in the profession of arms here in the United States have been saying this, that this is more than just a proxy war. This is war between NATO, the United States, and Russia. It's just that we're using the Ukrainians as our armed forces to do it. And President Putin and his team, they have seen that all along, too. I mean, go back and look at the rhetoric that's been coming from the Kremlin all these years, and you'll see that they acknowledged it and they saw it. And we're very fortunate that they haven't struck targets outside of Ukrainian territory. And I think that actually sends a very strong message that peace is very possible still, because, they don't want to risk a nuclear conflagration with the United States. They don't want to risk war on the rest of the continent of Europe. And that action or lack of action sends that very strong signal. So we've still got an opportunity here, but I think it's going to take personal interaction with President Trump and President Putin at a minimum, and probably bring Zelensky to that table, too.
All right, now let's talk about war elsewhere. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of flare-ups all over the world. Let's talk about that situation at the Diego Garcia base. Anywhere from 2 to 7 B-2 bombers still there, in what looks like a real warning to Iran. But is it a warning, Colonel, or is it a ramp up for an attack? Where are we now in this situation?
Well, we are clearly massing air forces. We've moved another aircraft carrier battle group into the Middle East. It's now there. Saw some open source reporting that B-1 bombers were deploying back to the Middle East just yesterday, early yesterday morning. So we're clearly massing air forces there, and that is not just a warning, but it's a warning with teeth. I mean, this is not something that we do. As a matter of fact, we have never deployed the number of B-2 bombers anywhere in the world ever. So the Iranians need to pay attention to this, and they really need to rethink their strategy of using their proxies to do violent kinetic warfare on not just American forces and NATO forces, but against international shipping. That's the part that's got the United States of America directly involved now in forceful, muscular military operations against the Houthis. And you know what? If I were advising the president, I'd be advising him to go ahead and destroy those Iranian command and control and targeting ships that have been doing the targeting and command and control for the Houthis the entire time they've been conducting this operation. It's time to eliminate those and put that piece of this conflict to bed, and not just send a message to Iran, but actually make them pay and be held responsible for this destruction and this attack on civilians. It's clear why this has to happen. But what I don't want to see is the United States get in another endless war with the Iranians and put more boots on the ground. As a matter of fact, I've called for removing America's ground force boots on the ground in the Middle East for some time now. There's really no strategic and vital national interest reason for them to be on the ground, especially since Syria has fallen and we're so-called allies with the folks in charge of that country, or that are supposed to be in charge of that country. So we need to get them out of there. They're just targets, and we've gotten Americans killed that didn't need to be killed, and it's ratcheted the situation up there. But this B-2 deployment, that is a huge warning. It's not just a message; it's a warning, because we don't put B-2s of over a third of our force size outside of the United States. Normally, they fly combat missions from their home base in Missouri and then return there, maybe after doing a quick turnaround in Diego Garcia. And there are a lot of issues associated with deploying those types of platforms to a location like Diego Garcia and then be able to operate from there. And we're clearly establishing that base as a B-2 bomber base that is within reach of the Iranians, and the Iranians won't be able to stop it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, this is, by the way, just our discussion about this just, again, reminds me of something that's always bothered me in my 30-plus years in news, is that we don't have a go-to defense news broadcast or station in this country. We should. There's lots of stuff online. The internet has really made it possible for people to do their own homework. But this is an historic, as you say, an historic deployment. This would be a lead story if we just had a channel or a show that just did defense news that was on a mainstream outlet. But, you know, I try to get as much of it as I can with great guests like you. Colonel Rob Maness, thank you so much for joining us. It's only Wednesday, but you know me. I like the early have a good weekend wishes, so I'm going to send that over to you, and thank you again for joining us.
You bet, Jake. I'd be happy to help Rural America's Voice set up a defense news program. That's what we cover.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I'm going to have your people talk to my people. Thanks a lot. All right. Coming up, the feds want the death penalty for the man who murdered a healthcare CEO in New York in December. I'll talk about the pros and cons connected to that strategy. And Vice President J.D. Vance mixes it up with a so-called journalist who thought he had the goods on the Trump team's deportation of an illegal alien. He learned the hard way that he didn't. Don't mix it up with J.D. American Sunrise Early Edition is coming right back. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. I'm Jake Novak. Special welcome to those of you watching and following and commenting on Getter and Rumble. Here's a newsflash, everyone. News is now interactive. We don't expect our viewers in TV news, if you want to be successful, to be just passive people sitting and watching television like they were in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and begging Nurse Ratched to change the channel, if you know what I mean. You got to have people and allow people to have their voice. We love giving that to you here on Real America's Voice. All right, yesterday, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that the Justice Department prosecutors will indeed be pursuing the death penalty against Luigi Mangione. Remember, that is the young man who shot and killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson on the sidewalks of New York in December in a brazen attack. I don't mean to just convict him right there. He's pretty much admitted to the crime. There isn't going to be an argument at trial that he wasn't the shooter. Just letting you know about that, giving you a little bit of a preview. But Bondi is and the Justice Department want to go for the death penalty, and there's some pros and cons involved with this. Now, I think the con here is that already, as many of you know, the far left has made a folk hero out of Mangione, going after his CEO. A lot of people have some legitimate beefs with the health insurance industry. Of course, what they may not realize is that shooting one in the streets is only going to make it worse for a lot of reasons. So making him a target of a death penalty, potential death penalty, is only going to make them much more motivated and try to turn this trial into a referendum on health insurance and not about necessarily the crime. The good news is, however, is that I think you have to have a Justice Department that reflects the will of the American people. And in every poll for the last 50, 60 years, the American people have clearly said that they support the death penalty. Obviously, in cases where the evidence is clear, couldn't be more clear here. Obviously, in cases where it was a completely unjustified murder. Of course, unjustified murder is a oxymoron, is repetitive, I should say. If it's a murder, it's not justified. So there's some pros and cons here. It's going to cause a bigger amount of debate about this. But look, this has to happen, I think. We need to have this discussion in America. And I hope that it doesn't become just about health insurance and it becomes about this brazen crime, because this isn't going to solve anything. I'm saying this to the people there who have all these legitimate beefs about health insurance. You need to understand murdering the CEO made things worse, not better for you and your cause. All right, here's another hot tip. You probably shouldn't pick a fight with Vice President J.D. Vance on social media on especially an issue like deportation and border policies. Guy named Kyle Cheney tried to do that. Now, you may have seen a report in the news media just a couple of days ago about how the Trump administration admitted that they may have deported the wrong guy from Venezuela and sent him to El Salvador. The problem is the wrong guy was still not an innocent man. This was someone who a judge in 2019 determined was indeed a member of the murderous MS-13 gang. That's something that J.D. Vance reminded that journalist about. And he was also someone who had many, many other crimes on his rap sheet, including the fact that he never showed up to trials. Now, again, it was a mistake of some kind. But going again, this is once again, I can't believe that the Democrats and people in the news media who support Democrats, and by that I mean elected Democrats and their supporters in the news media, continue to make it this easy for Donald Trump. You're really willing to die on the hill that was created by an MS-13 gang member who never showed up to cases? That's who we're crying about? It's really, really amazing. And J.D. Vance called him on it, and I think he won that argument. All right. Some people never learn, or maybe they just don't want to learn. About 7 months ago, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was the subject of the most overtly anti-Semitic incident in American political history. I'll talk about that more in just a second. But here's what he did earlier this week. He okayed a major public donation, $5 million, to a Muslim cultural center in Philadelphia. Now, that's not a problem on its face. The problem is the specific cultural center that he chose. This is a place that has hosted rabid anti-Semitic speakers, that has had many other events that are anti-American and anti-Semitic. This is extremely problematic. Now, let me go back to 7 months ago. Back in August, when Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris became the nominee, again, she was just installed as nominee for the Democrats, you'll remember that almost anyone worth a penny's worth of listening to in the political punditry on the right and the left immediately identified Josh Shapiro, the young governor of Pennsylvania, a Democrat, as the best choice for Kamala Harris's running mate. He was picked over. They chose Tim Walz instead. And there's not one honest person in the world who will tell you the reason was anything other than anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. They didn't choose Josh Shapiro because he was a Jew. Anyone who says otherwise is not telling you the truth. He was from Pennsylvania, a key swing state, which they ended up losing, by the way, by a very small margin. I'm not 100% sure they still win Pennsylvania if she had chosen Josh Shapiro, but I'm about 99% sure. And now Josh Shapiro had two choices after that very, very brazen anti-Semitic choice of which he was the victim. He could have either left the Democratic Party or he could triple and quadruple down on being obsequious, of pretending that there isn't a problem, thinking that if he does more of what the DNC wants him to do, they'll finally give him his due. Of course, we know what choice he made. It was the latter, and it was a big mistake. That never works. If Josh Shapiro thinks he's ever going to win the Democratic nomination for president, he's deluding himself. And it's a very, very sad state of affairs. Again, just as a reminder, the Democrats deliberately passed over Josh Shapiro in 2024. It was only 7 months ago. And this guy's continuing to do things which harm not only his own standing, but also the standing of other Jewish Americans. I don't know what to say about it other than I'm incredibly frustrated. This is a very disappointing development. All right, coming up on American Sunrise Early Edition, we're going to talk about it's Tariff Day here in America. The president calls it Liberation Day, and the stock markets continue to swing really wildly on all the tariff news. Big gains a couple days ago, some gains yesterday, now they're down. They don't know what to expect. And then let's talk about a little bit of car news right now. The sales numbers are in for March. How did Ford and GM do with all those buyers supposedly rushing to beat those tariff price hikes? American Sunrise Early Edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. That is Cavalier, North Dakota. Hey, we're trying to make people feel excited about spring and maybe even the summer, and then we got to show this North Dakota shot where it looks like it's the middle of January, but it's still a beautiful shot in its own way. Thank you, control room. All right, let's take a look at where the markets are going to begin today, and we're in the red to start the day. But I'm telling you, you blink your eyes for 1 second, and the markets are going in another direction. They are really trying to get a handle on this tariff thing. We could be up by a lot by the end of the day. You never know. And gold still near that all-time high, 31.56. And I'll talk more about gold in just a few minutes. And let's look at Bitcoin real quick just for a second. Bitcoin, again, staying in that range. It's been stuck between 80 and 88,000 for a few weeks now. And there it is right there, just about 85,000. So there you go. All right. A federal judge is rejecting Johnson & Johnson's proposed $10 billion settlement with the plaintiffs who say that the company's talcum powder products caused their cancers. So in the news, because of that, Johnson & Johnson shares lost 8% in trading yesterday. A lot of people wonder, why does it happen when a company makes a big settlement? Does their stock usually go up? And when the settlement is rejected, why does it go down? The answer is just relief. People just want to have some clarity on how much money is going one way or the other. They didn't get that, so now we're going to have to start all over again. All right, Visa wants to replace MasterCard as Apple's primary credit card partner with Apple Card. Apple has their own credit card, the Apple Card. That has to be backed up by a bigger company, and it's been MasterCard for all these years. Now Visa wants to get into that business and take it away from MasterCard. They're bidding $100 million to get into that business. By the way, Goldman Sachs and MasterCard partnered with Apple on the Apple Card, but it was revealed in late 2023 that they weren't going to continue that partnership. But so far, no one else has stepped in to take it over. Visa is trying to do that right now. All right. The Hooters restaurant chain. I know many of you are big fans of it. Probably not. I thought that it was all gone almost. But the Hooters restaurant chain is declaring bankruptcy. But don't cry yet, everyone. Just get a hold of yourself if you're a Hooters fan. It turns out that they're declaring bankruptcy so one of the chain's founders and another franchisee can buy up the company. It's a little bit easier to buy these companies out of bankruptcy. That's the reason why they do this. Not a lot. There was a time where there was a Hooters in every town in America. Right now, there's only about 30 of them that are what they call high-performing Hooters restaurants. Those are mostly in Florida and Illinois. So for those of you in Florida and Illinois, you're going to keep your Hooters restaurants. They're mostly sports bars, and we know the other reason why people go to Hooters is to look at the female waitresses. I get it, but it's just not as popular as it was 30 years ago. Boy, was that a sensation in America for those of you who remember the early and mid-'90s in Hooters. All right. Hey, this is a start. I was telling you now about the tariffs going into place, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But a big part of the tariff policies from the Trump administration is to get all of the other countries in the world to remove tariffs against U.S. products. And Israel became the first country, yesterday at least, to announce that it is removing all tariffs on American products. Now, we have to take this with a grain of salt. Israel didn't have many tariffs on American products. They had a 98% open trade deal with the United States. But for those 2% of products, there will be no more tariffs. All right, that's progress. All right, let's get our motors running, shall we? All right, GM was a big winner for the first 3 months of this year. We're getting these sales figures out. The automaker says it had a 16.7% jump in American sales compared to the first quarter of 2024. That's actually a big jump, folks. And here's why. They had big gains in their full-size SUV sales. That was a major reason. All right, put a little note on that. Now, Ford reported a 1.3% sales decline, largely due to the discontinuation of its Ford Edge SUV. Are you sensing a pattern here? For those of you who watch this program regularly, you know that, love or hate this fact, Ford and GM only succeed as companies when they are focusing on their trucks and SUVs. That's what they do well. That's what customers love from those two companies. Electric vehicles, sedans, helicopters, whatever else they want to get into doesn't work for these companies. This is like Economics 101, Car Economics 101. And so here we have the proof once again. GM gets better sales for their full-size SUVs. Ford takes one of their SUVs off the market, and the results are very obvious. All right, speaking of another car company, Nissan has lowered the prices for two of its most popular models. They're also SUVs, by the way. The Rogue compact SUV and the Pathfinder midsize SUV. The Rogue's prices are reduced by, depending on the model that you get, $640 to $1,930. That's a significant discount. And the Pathfinder's prices, they have been reduced by $670 to $1,170. Remember, Nissan trying to survive as a company right now after Honda decided not to merge with Nissan. They broke up. It's one of the saddest, romantic stories of the year. That the love did not win out. But you guys, as customers, love the Rogue, you love the Pathfinder, and now you can get it for less. This is the kind of thing that companies do if they want to survive. Sometimes they'll have to sell something that's popular at a discount and hope to keep your customer loyalty. All right, President Trump is working to reverse the additional. Now, these are additional restrictions on emissions that the Biden administration put into place on the American auto industry. He's not being shy about why. Listen.
We're going to go back probably to a 2020 standard. So we'll have 2020 standard, and that's just a few years ago. Oh, they're making it so difficult. All over the world they're making it. It doesn't mean a damn bit of difference even for the environment. It doesn't matter. They make it impossible for people to build cars. So we're going to be doing much different. 2020 is a strong standard.
Okay, so he's going back to the 2020 standards, which were pretty strong. That's what President Trump's talking about. Of course, all the environmentalists and partisan political types are going to be saying, how can President Trump say emissions doesn't have a difference on the environment? Well, again, these are very new restrictions that came in during the Biden administration, and there's absolutely no respected scientist who will say that we know yet whether those new restrictions on emissions have had any positive effect at all. But again, try to connect this story to what I was talking about earlier with Ford and GM's sales results for the first quarter of the year. If you put strict emission standards on your auto industry in America, an auto industry that I said before and all the data shows for 40 years really relies on trucks and SUVs, gas-powered trucks and SUVs, and you restrict the emissions, you are basically killing the American auto industry. That's what's going on. Again, maybe one day Ford and GM will make products other than trucks and SUVs that the whole world wants to buy, including Americans. But they haven't done that, and they've had a lot of chances to do it. If you restrict emissions to newer and higher levels year after year, you're going to kill that industry because they can't survive without those gas-powered, bigger vehicles. All right, let's get back to price cuts. I love talking about price cuts. The 2024 BMW XM SUV is a really hot-selling item here in America. Actually, it's not. No one's buying it. And so here come the price cuts. Dealers are now offering up to $22,500 off on the 2024 XM. Okay, now, that may not seem like it's a lot when the XM lists for $160,000 retail, but, it is a lot more than even 10% off, so that's a big deal. Now, the 2025 BMW is also available with a $12,500 discount, so they're slashing prices on that as well. This is an SUV that BMW is not having a good time selling, again, because people love American-made SUVs and trucks and things like that. But at least you can get your big discount. $22,500 off a car. I don't care how much it sells for. That's a lot. All right. Tariff wars, recession fears, and stubborn inflation. No wonder gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs lately. In volatile markets like right now, don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. Take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Is it time for you to hedge against inflation and economic instability with gold? To learn how to own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account, text America to 989-898. Birch Gold will then send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Again, text America to the number 989-898 with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews. I trust Birch Gold to help me protect my savings with gold, and now you can too. It took us decades to get into the tangled mess they're trying to unpack now. How long will it take to get out of it, and at what cost? Text America to 989-898 today. All right, coming up, the Wisconsin Supreme Court race came down to the wire, or maybe it didn't. A clear victory for the liberal in that election. We'll talk about what that all means when we come back. It's Wednesday, April 2nd. Here are some of this morning's top stories. A split decision in Wisconsin. Liberal Judge Susan Crawford wins the open state Supreme Court seat, but voters by an even larger margin approve voter ID laws. How did that happen? I'll explain. Meanwhile, in Florida, the two special elections for vacated seats in the U.S. House of Representatives stay with the GOP. So that gives the Republicans now a 7-seat majority in the House. And boy, does every vote count, as Speaker Mike Johnson knows that all too well this morning. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the Justice Department will seek the death penalty for Luigi Mangione, who was accused of gunning down the CEO of United Healthcare in New York in December. But will going for the death penalty make it harder to convict the man who's already become a folk hero to the far left? And the president calls it Liberation Day. I guess Liberation Day from being a one-sided tariff regime in the world. The White House calls it liberation because tariffs on those countries are now in effect. Perhaps more importantly, we will find out whether Wall Street likes this or doesn't, because they've been going back and forth on it for days. American Sunrise Early Edition continues now. Welcome to this Wednesday here on American Sunrise Early Edition. Again, a special welcome to those of you following and commenting on Getter and Rumble. This is an interactive news program, and that's the only way to go these days. I'm not expecting you to just sit there like a trained seal. And that's why we also bring in some great guests. So joining me right now is Virginia Allen. She is a senior producer at the Daily Signal. And Virginia, let's talk about these Wisconsin and Florida races. But I want to float this idea by you because this is exactly what I think happened in Wisconsin, where a liberal judge won the election pretty clearly, Susan Crawford, for that vacated seat. But at the same time, by an even larger majority, the voters in Wisconsin supported a voter ID law. And I have one word that I think explains that split decision, and that is abortion. I think that was really the reason. But I'd love to get your take on it, Virginia.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that there are core principles and policies that all Americans, whether Democrat or Republican, can rally around. And one of those, in some ways, like an issue like abortion that kind of goes across party lines sometimes, is certainly that issue of voter ID, right? It's common sense that people vote with a voter ID. And this is something that obviously in Wisconsin that voters stand behind. And I also think it's indicative of a little bit of the political moment that we find ourselves in. We saw this in the 2024 election, that a vote for President Trump or a vote for a common sense policy like voter ID, that vote doesn't always translate down the ticket to voting completely Republican. I spent some time in North Carolina during the 2024 presidential election at polling sites, and I spoke with a number of voters who said, oh yeah, I mainly voted all Democrat. And I was like, oh, so you voted for Kamala Harris? I said, oh, no, I voted for Trump, but everyone else I voted Democrat. I was like, this is really, really fascinating that there's a little bit of a split and a difference. And so I actually think that Susan Crawford's victory in Wisconsin at the Wisconsin Supreme Court, I actually think this is a really good learning opportunity and moment for the GOP, that they're able to kind of be reminded we're still 18 months out from midterm elections. They have plenty of time, but they need to recognize just because Wisconsin went for Trump, now only by about 1%, but still, Wisconsin did go for Trump in the 2024 election. But just because Trump won it, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that future GOP candidates are going to have great success in Wisconsin. So the GOP, they need to assess, okay, how can we work on translating some of those Trump voters into GOP voters? What's the appeal that individuals see in an individual like Trump that maybe they're not seeing in the rest of the Republican Party? So there needs to be a bit of a deep dive if Republicans want to have success come the midterm elections. If they want to have success in Wisconsin, they need to be looking at what happened here. What do we do differently next time?
Yeah, well, and my advice would be to not make it so much about President Trump. I mean, I don't think that the mainstream media and even a lot of the conservative media is going to try to pretend that this was some kind of a hedge against Trump personally. I really don't think that was what was going on. I think that if you have a state that isn't a deep red state and there is a woman running for a judicial position who they believe will be more moderate on abortion, it's going to be very, very hard to win. So either the Republicans need to come up with a different message on abortion. I don't think they should capitulate completely. That's not going to work either. They will lose too many of their supporters. But maybe they need to go the Chris Christie, Bobby Jindal route, which was started actually 10 years ago, where they pushed for putting all contraception over the counter as a way to try to make it as some kind of compromise here, to talk about how it isn't just men telling them what to do. But this is a very difficult issue with the Republicans, and they still haven't figured it out. And the Democrats, of course, may run out of time on using that as a magic bullet. But right now, in some races, it is a magic bullet for them, and the Republicans need to realize that. All right, let's talk about another case. Unfortunately, the segue is bullets, and I don't mean to do that. I'm not trying to be crass. But Virginia, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has decided that the shooter in the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione, and again, I'm not convicting him here. When he does go to trial, there will be no argument that someone else was the shooter. So don't call me and say I just convicted him and that he can sue me now. But they've decided to go for the death penalty in this case. And, again, there's some pros and cons here. I think it might make it harder in some ways to convict him. But at the same time, it may send a message for other criminals around the country that this is a very serious Justice Department. And while they may not be able to get the death penalty in this case, they're going to get it in some other states, even though, again, it's a federal case, but it's going to be jurors in New York that are going to be picked. I'd love to get your take on this. Do you think that they're taking too much of a risk here by saying, even before the trial starts, that they're going for the death penalty?
It certainly is a bold move, but I think it's very intentionally a bold move because it is about the messaging. You're absolutely right. I think the Trump administration, certainly Attorney General Pam Bondi, wants there to be a very clear message to all criminals that if you are going to essentially use an act of terror to inflict violence, to take another life, just because you don't like their policy stance, there will be absolutely no tolerance of that in the United States. And we've seen this so far throughout the Trump administration. I mean, you look at any issue, Pam Bondi has also come out with very, very clear messaging on the attacks on the Tesla trucks, saying we're not putting up with this. These are acts of domestic terrorism. You look at the aggressive push to deport criminal illegal aliens. I mean, all of this is very targeted of saying, in America, we're not going to tolerate senseless violence, crime. It ends with this administration, and this really clear message to anyone who would be thinking, especially in light of the fact that Luigi Mangione has received a lot of, in some ways, pretty positive press from the left across social media, and has sort of been hailed this weird pseudo hero for what he did. The message has to be so clear from the Trump administration of for anyone out there who would think of doing something similar, you could potentially face the death penalty. And so I really think that this does all come down to that messaging side.
Yeah, and there's a trap here, I think, as well. And now by saying that they're going after the death penalty, some of those people who are maybe a little bit more shy about supporting somebody like Mangione because of the crassness and the brutality of that crime might actually come out off on the sidelines. And I'm talking about elected Democrats might actually come out and support him in some way. And that'll be yet another crazy hill for them to die on. They're dying on hills for Tren de Aragua. Are they going to actually throw someone who not only committed a brutal act of murder on the streets of sidewalks, I should say, of New York, but someone who's clearly not all there? I mean, I don't think he's insane, because insane means he didn't know what he was doing. But he's clearly not mentally healthy. And that's who they want to create as a hero. I think that the administration would love to see some elected Democrats come out and support him as if he's a hero as well. And some of them might actually fall for that trap now that they're going for the death penalty. All right, Virginia, it's April 2nd, so you know what that means. President Trump says it's going to be Liberation Day. I love that messaging. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's fun. Now that we are now imposing tariffs on reciprocal tariffs, and, listen, Wall Street doesn't know what to make of it yet. Mostly they're down on it, but some days they're up. It goes back and forth. But they are predicting, some of those economic experts are predicting real pain for consumers right away. I'd love to get your take on whether you think, how's that going to go over if we go to the supermarket and shop at maybe a department store or online for the next few weeks and we see no change in prices? Will there be a change in tune over that, or will they just move on to another story?
I think if there's no change in prices, there probably won't be much of a change in tune. If there's a skyrocketing of prices, you're going to hear from Americans, and you're going to hear very loud and clear. But I think the factor and what the Trump administration needs to make sure they communicate very well, which I think they will because they're very, very good at messaging, is that the president is playing a bit of a long game here. Often what we see with these economic moves, specifically with imposing additional tariffs, there might be a temporary rise in prices of some goods. Some might fall, but some might rise. But there's an adjustment period because Trump has been really clear. He wants to bring manufacturing back to the United States. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. And ultimately, that will strengthen the U.S. economy. It will create more jobs. And it will also firm up U.S. national security when we're not dependent on China for so much of our product. So it's a win in the long game for America. But really, that factor is the Trump administration needs to keep reminding the American people of that. Hey, this is about years down the road. This is about your kids. This is about your grandkids. This is about the future of America that we are building long term. And then there's another factor here that I think Trump wants to send a really, really clear message to our adversaries, specifically to China, to say, you're not going to take advantage of U.S. and our trade policy anymore. And then even sending messages to Canada and to Mexico to say, we need that full cooperation in securing the border. And we have to work together on that, or else these tariffs are going to continue.
All right, Virginia, I don't have time to talk about it, but I want everyone to check out your column in the Daily Signal, your story in the Daily Signal about how the Trump administration has hit 100,000 deportees very early on. So check that out in the Daily Signal. There it is. You can check that out. Thank you so much for joining us. David Brody is going to be with us in just a moment. We're going to talk about GOP dysfunction. Stick with us. It's a live shot of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My daughter's going to be moving there pretty soon. I'm really excited about it for her. Hey, welcome back to American Sunrise Early Edition. As I often say these days, Democrats offer no democracy to their voters. You know, they just shove the last 2 or 3 presidential candidates down their throats. But sometimes Republicans offer a little too much democracy, and we keep seeing that in the House of Representatives. By that, I mean they don't really give a lot of rope. They don't allow their own leaders to kind of set the agenda as much as maybe they should, and then they can reassess every year or so as opposed to every 2 weeks. David Brody joins me now, and we saw that yesterday. Now they're shutting down all business in the House because of this dispute between the Speaker and one of the Republican members from Florida, Anna Paulina Luna. And now nothing can get done because, when you have only a 5-vote majority, it's up to 7 now, but those guys won't be seated for a while. Anything can fall apart like a house of cards pretty quickly.
Yeah, Jake, it's a mess, really. And it's a short-term deal. It'll just blow over and, next week they'll move on. But the point is that I'm not quite sure why Speaker Johnson needed to necessarily do this, though I kind of understand overall what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of contours to this as it relates to proxy voting. That's what Anna Paulina Luna wanted, basically having new parents to be allowed to vote remotely rather than in Congress. And Mike Johnson is just fully against that. He doesn't think proxy voting is a good idea. He thinks it could lead to proxy voting on X, Y, and Z issue, maybe for Democrats next time they're in power. I mean, it goes down a very slippery slope. And there's a lot of folks in Congress that say, well, wait a minute. If you're going to be in Congress, then get here to vote. If you want to be home and you need to be with your child, that makes sense too, but then don't be in Congress. So it's kind of I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm getting into the actual issue rather than the politics of it all. But the fact of the matter is that here's the truth of the matter. Mike Johnson couldn't let this Anna Paulina Luna vote be a standalone vote. He had to tuck it inside a rule to try to get the rule, basically get that out of contention. He had to stick it inside that way to give Republicans a dare, right? He thought Republicans would say, let's vote on judges, let's vote on requiring ID for voting. As opposed to actually getting Luna's bill approved. So he gave Republicans a choice, but there were 9 Republicans that said, no, we're not going to do this. So I don't know, it's a little, not confusing, but it just doesn't make much sense. It really shouldn't have happened, but it did.
Well, I will say this, though. Speaker Johnson has herded the cats in the House pretty well and at above expectations so far until what happened yesterday. You're right. It probably will blow over. But it should remind everybody. I mean, if the Republicans want to take a victory out of this, then it just should remind them, especially also with the Wisconsin court race, it should remind them that they have a big hill to climb with the midterms. Again, it's a lot more than a year. It's really almost 2 years to go. But they've got to be ready for this because they're at this point, they need to have a better and a clearer message. And you're going to get that on American Sunrise the next 2 hours coming up with David, Brody, and the rest of the crew. Thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday. It's been a wild day. It's Liberation Day in America, if you like it that way. I'm Jake Novak. I'll see you again tomorrow.
American Sunrise is a great way to start your morning. Join us Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We've got the news of the day and some compelling interviews that you don't want to miss. Here's what you missed from yesterday.
Look at me, Allison. I'm marvelous. Absolutely marvelous.
Look at you. Terrance looks like he should be down here in West Palm. Is that a linen jacket? I mean, hey, let's go for cocktails after the show.
The fact that you're bringing up cocktails and we're literally a minute and a half into the show, this is going to be a great show, folks. I can tell you that now.
I don't know if you saw Kid Rock in the Oval Office yesterday. It was phenomenal. He came dressed for the occasion.
Those executive orders, of course, were signed. You can see Kid Rock there. Interestingly, though, what you're watching here, President Trump signing an executive order basically ending ticket price gouging and scalping for live entertainment. Kid Rock kind of pushed this initiative, and President Trump now getting on board.
When I saw that visual, all I thought Evel Knievel was dead. I had no idea that Evel Knievel made it to the White House.
The issue this morning is Liberation Day and its looming effects on our economy. President Trump is expected to unveil new tariffs Tuesday on America's global trading partners.
I think tomorrow is going to be Liberation Day for America. I'm fully on board with these tariffs. I think it's a way to level the playing field. For too long,
I think the president will announce tomorrow how much more commitments he's gotten from foreign companies or American companies producing things overseas coming back to the United States. He teased this yesterday, saying it's closing in on $5 trillion since he took office on January 2020. And that is a massive influx into our economy. And it proves that tariffs do have an impact in terms of insourcing, returning American jobs and American manufacturers to American soil.
If we see the market take a dip or a quick correction, I don't think we should panic. That's what the market does. When you look historically, that's what it's done. If all of a sudden the price of sheet metal goes up slightly or lumber goes up slightly, I think that is a short-term effect to what it could be. Look, if we look 2 years from now and see what the price of these goods are, perhaps it will be lower than they are today.
Far-left California lawmakers who are attempting to honor alleged CEO assassin Luigi Mangione with a radical new initiative targeting the healthcare industry.
They have to lose the name. It's so offensive.
California, right? Woke and all of this crazy stuff. And then you get this type of bill in his name, whereas you look at Trump and what they're doing, and what do you get? The Lake and Riley Act. Ahead on American Sunrise, Liberation Day. The White House says today will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. President Trump's big reciprocal tariff plan to be unveiled. How will it impact America's economy and what it could mean for you? Those details ahead. Plus, Cory Booker sets a record with a marathon anti-MAGA rant in the Senate. Talk about bloviating. Did it rally the anti-Trump resistance, or was he just blowing a lot of hot air? Find out. And Trump derangement syndrome is hitting the Dems hard. In moments, the reason why a Democrat congresswoman says she's training Americans to help take down a potential, quote, dictatorship. The latest ahead, those stories and more as American Sunrise starts right now. Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
we have breaking news to share with you.
Politics.
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
We've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina.
Good morning. I'm Allison Ons, in for a vacationing Dr. Gina live from West Palm Beach. Welcome to American Sunrise. Let's bring in David Brody in Washington, D.C. and Terrance Bates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning, gentlemen, and happy Liberation Day.
Yeah.
To you too, Allison.
Absolutely. Let's just get right into it because Liberation Day is what everybody's going to be talking about today, guys. And I have to say, apart from the substance of the tariffs that we're expecting President Trump to lay out, just the term Liberation Day shows that he is a master marketer. It seems like it's given the day even more significance, Allison, than it normally would. Had it not been Liberation Day, had he not coined this day, I think we would have said, okay, he's going to lay out some tariffs and we'll see how things go. But now we're saying Happy Liberation Day right off the top of the show, Allison.
I think that's such a good point because this really is a patriotic message. We are trying to protect this country, rebuild this country, and so it's really about American sovereignty.
Yeah, and it's about fairness, ultimately. Look, I mean, for example, you got India that charges 100% tariff on, let's say, U.S. motorcycles. I say, let's say, that is true. India's taxing U.S. motorcycles, 100% tariff coming in. We're taxing Indian motorcycles coming into our country 2.4%. 100% versus 2.4%. Anyhow, so and the list is like, it's like parchment scroll stuff, guys. I mean, it just goes on and on. And so this is what Donald Trump, the president of the United States, boy, it still sounds good to say that, is trying to do. And so we'll see. I think it could be 20% across the board on most imports. That would be. That's the headline to look for to see if it's that, or will it be reciprocal as in per country, per good? It just depends. So we're going to find out. I believe it's 4 p.m. Eastern today. 4 p.m. Eastern, guys.
And it also depends on what some of these countries want to do in terms of investing in the United States. So there could be some wiggle room there. So I heard someone put it that it's really your choice in terms of other countries. They feel like these tariffs may be pushed upon them. But hey, do you want to invest in the United States? There may be some room to play.
And by all indications, President Trump and his advisors are really taking this very, very seriously because apparently they're still dotting I's and crossing T's with this plan even at this hour. So it's not necessarily a done deal. That's why 4 p.m. This afternoon Eastern time in the Rose Garden, that's when the actual announcement is going to be. And again, all the reporting out there is that they are still working to finalize this plan, showing that they are taking this seriously and making sure that it truly does benefit the American people. All right, Allison, would you get us to our Bible verse, please?
I would love to. Let's check out today's Bible verse. It's Matthew 11:28-29, and it reads, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Well, from the Holy Bible to America's Liberation Day, President Donald Trump is expected to make his speech on tariffs, dubbed the Make America Wealthy Again event in the Rose Garden. President Trump is giving the speech at 4 p.m. after the markets close. For the details and more, let's head over to D.C., where Chief White House correspondent Brian Glenn is standing by. Good morning, Brian. How you doing?
Hey, Brian.
Good morning. Happy Liberation Day. I put on my best color combination to represent pro-USA growth in this country.
I like it. I like it. Okay, Brian, what do you expect will happen when these new tariffs are imposed?
Well, as you can kind of see the pre-market indications right now, it's in the red. A lot of the uncertainty of what's going to happen. Of course, yesterday, Carolyn Levitt was kind of tight-lipped on exactly some of the details that we'll find out a little bit later today at 4 o'clock. But I do expect this to be, well, we've always said it before, make America wealthy again, a very pro-America, America-first approach to this. When you look at the trade deficits that we have right now, the highest with China, Mexico, and Vietnam, those are the top three, and the trade imbalance, and David, you spoke of that in the open, it doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. And we finally have a president that's going to get in the Oval Office and put the economic plans and our trade and all of the imports and tariffs first to benefit Americans. This is nothing more also than a negotiation tool to entice companies to invest in our own country.
No doubt about it. We're going to have a lot more on this throughout the entire next 2 hours for sure. And let's be clear also, if anybody's asking, can the president do this as it relates to unilateral decisions on tariffs, the answer is yes. I mean, we remember this. Well, I don't remember. I wasn't alive in 1930, but the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act was passed by Congress. But then 4 years later, in 1934, they actually went ahead and passed legislation that would give the president unilateral authority to go ahead and take care of tariffs the way he best saw fit. So we'll have more on that a little bit later. Hey, Brian, I want to talk to you about what happened in the House yesterday. I mean, that was wild stuff. It was highly unusual. So you had Speaker Johnson and GOP leadership basically try and kill a bill by the Republican Congresswoman, one of their own, Anna Paulina Luna, that would allow proxy voting for new parents so they could vote remotely. So essentially, they made all Republican members choose between backing Luna or voting for the overall rule that would have allowed a vote on requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote and reining in judges. So basically, it was a dare. I mean, if you vote to support Luna and allow her proposal to come to the floor, then you're going to halt action on other legislation. I mean, that was what they did. 9 Republicans went with Luna, and they defeated Mike Johnson. I mean, and then, oh, by the way, sorry, did I bury the lead? Mike Johnson said, that's it. We're done. We're not taking up anything the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Have a nice, go to Cracker Barrel in your home districts. I'm curious to get your take, Brian.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a shocking moment. I was actually on Capitol Hill when that announcement was made that they basically cleared votes for the rest of the week, and it was kind of a shock. It was a shock to me to hear that drastic move. But I will say that bill was actually originated from a Democrat. That's her, a Democrat from Colorado. That's her initial bill, and she got Anna Paulina Luna to join in on that and bring some of her colleagues over on this. It's a heated topic. I understand it. I really do. But at the end of the day, like right now in the public court of opinion of how people view leaders in Congress and the Senate and basically the government in general, to extend all these days off or to extend the ability to work from home, proxy vote, fare well in the public court of opinion. If you look on Twitter and you look at some of the comments on this, a lot of people want in the real world, they don't necessarily get that much time off and they don't get to work from home. Here we are telling people to get back into the office and not work from home. Then all of a sudden, our own colleagues are saying, well, wait a minute, we want to be able to work from home. It kind of counteracts the message we've been sending with the Doge message all along. So it's very sensitive right now. It's a very controversial topic, but it was fun to watch yesterday as they rallied around the House floor, a baby in hand. It was the showmanship of this whole thing was on display for sure.
Yeah, you make some good points for sure.
No, absolutely. Brian, since you brought up showmanship, let's go to the other side of the Capitol. I'm curious about the feedback that you're hearing there at the White House about Senator Cory Booker, his record-breaking marathon speech on the Senate floor yesterday. He, of course, spoke for about 25 hours while protesting President Trump's administration and the policies. What are people there at the White House saying? I would imagine to some degree they were watching it.
Yeah, I think they were. Hang on a second. I'm getting an email from Cory Booker. Oh, it's a fundraising email that's based upon him.
I don't believe anything. No. We're not falling for it again. Just kidding.
But I will say this. That is exactly what Cory Booker is going to do now. See, this is a political stunt that he can use to fundraise to help defeat the, radical, we're trying to basically take down democracy, the Republicans in office. It was a point. I think it was look, it's a publicity stunt. This is what they do. This is what they do to get attention on themselves. Now, as far as the messaging and what does it say about the Democrat Party? Well, this is what they're doing to help lower the price of consumer goods, to help the imbalance of trade, our trade deficit, and help, peace in the Middle East. If all they can do is grandstand like this, and of course, Priya Jayapal, I believe, was one of the other ones that was putting on a clinic, basically, on how to take down Republican messaging. The Democrats, they're fresh out of ideas, so they turn to stunts like this. And by the way, the longest time I've ever been on a live broadcast was during Glenn Youngkin's gubernatorial election night. I did 8.5 hours by myself on my feet, no co-host. And I just about dropped dead after that. So My prayers and thoughts for Cory Booker. I hope he's resting today, because that will take a lot out of you to stand on your feet for that long.
Well,
So
Brian, you're a machine. You're unlike no other. You mentioned Congresswoman Jayapal. She says she's training Americans. This is crazy, to combat what she calls potential dictatorship of President Donald Trump. Listen to this.
We really need to help Americans understand what happens when democracies fall, when dictators take over. We've been pretty complacent in America. We haven't had to really deal with this in any real way. And now I think people need to understand what are the lessons from other countries, and working with experts who have studied democratic backsliding in countries around the world and the resistance movements that emerged to take on that democratic backsliding. We've developed a curriculum where we help people understand, how do you go after the pillars of support, not necessarily the person at the top.
Oh, Brian, Trump derangement syndrome is in full effect. What say you?
Well, I think they need to find out what works for the American people, what they voted for. President Trump won the Electoral College, the popular vote. His plans for the first 100 days have been going well. Like I said, they need to find out what matters to Americans and not matters to them personally in office, and how to stay in control. So we're winning, they're losing. That's the facts. But let them keep doing what they're doing, because the public opinion is on our side.
That's the facts. Brian Glenn, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up, we check out the hottest headlines from the Wrap Newsroom with T. Bates. Also, dramatic changes at the border cannot be overstated. Ahead, a San Diego Border Patrol chief sounds off on what the president's border policies have meant to keeping America safe. We'll be right back with more American Sunrise in just a moment.
This news break is brought to you by AMAC, Association of Mature American Citizens.
Nashville, Tennessee, here on a Liberation Wednesday. Liberation Day in America. Democrats might not call it that, but we will see what President Trump unveils at 4 p.m. Eastern today regarding tariffs. It's going to be a big deal. Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. Coming up, we're heading to Mexico, and we're going to talk with Ben and Oscar. You know them well. Ben Berquam, Oscar El Blue. They are there in Mexico, giving us the latest on what is happening when it comes to immigration in the United States, which is just in illegal immigration down like 95%. Yeah, not a shock. All right. First, though, T. Bates standing by with the latest headlines from the Real America's Voice newsroom, sponsored by AMAC.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
Well, today is what President Trump has dubbed Liberation Day. He's scheduled to lay out his plan for reciprocal tariffs during a ceremony scheduled for 4 o'clock this afternoon in the Rose Garden at the White House. While we know the president is looking to match the tariffs that other countries are charging us dollar for dollar, the White House is keeping details of the plan pretty hush-hush. However, one thing is for sure.
President Trump's economic vision is rooted in common sense. America will offer companies the lowest taxes, energy costs, regulations if they make their products right here in the United States and hire American workers for the job. It's simple. If you make your product in America, you will pay no tariffs.
The new duties on imports are expected to take effect immediately. Meantime, the Supreme Court is set to hear arguments today over locking Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid funding programs. It's all part of a larger push from the Trump administration and Republicans to defund the nonprofit, which of course is known for performing abortions. The case before the High Court is out of South Carolina. Lawyers for the Palmetto State will argue, quote, taxpayer dollars shouldn't be used to fund facilities that choose to profit off of abortion. Medicaid, which is federally funded, prohibits coverage of abortions in most cases. However, South Carolina argues that Planned Parenthood's government funding to provide birth control, cancer screenings, and other services, quote, frees up funds to provide abortions even if they're not directly tied to money from the federal government. Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri already blocked Planned Parenthood from seeing Medicaid patients, period. Many other Republican-led states are expected to do the same if the Supreme Court sides with South Carolina. Attorney General Pam Bondi is ordering federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty against the man accused of murdering United Health Group's CEO, Brian Thompson. The 26-year-old also faces both state and federal charges in New York. The state charges include murder as an act of terrorism along with weapons offenses. The federal case is the only one involving the potential of a death penalty, though. In deciding to move forward with the ultimate punishment, Bondi says, quote, after careful consideration, I have directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. The Attorney General lifted a moratorium on federal executions back in February. The pause had been in effect since 2021. That's a quick check of your headlines. I'll have more headlines coming your way shortly, including just how many deadly and violent criminals has the Trump administration deported since Inauguration Day. We've got the startling numbers for you ahead. Plus, a Democratic congressman says what most of us already knew: Joe Biden should have stepped aside sooner. The details of that statement and why now, coming up. First, though, a quick look at this day in history. It was on this date in 1865, as the rebel capital of Richmond, Virginia, fell to the Union Army, that the first and only Confederate president, Jefferson Davis, fled as the Civil War came to a close. Davis was captured about a month later by Northern soldiers near Irwinville, Georgia. He was imprisoned at Fort Monroe in Virginia for 2 years. The year before Davis's death, the former president of the Confederate States of America beseeched the young men of Mississippi to lay aside all rancor and to work for a reunited country. More American Sunrise coming your way after this break.
If I am shot on the battlefield and I should not recover, who will protect my wife and child? Care for my aged mother, who care for my aged mother, who will protect my wife and child?
Lear, North Dakota. Snow, April. Not necessarily unusual in that part of the woods, at least. That part of the neck of the woods. Oh, forget it. Never mind. I butchered it. Can we start that segment again? Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. All right, one of President Trump's major campaign promises was to secure the U.S. border. And as predicted, since the start of his second term, Trump has held true to that promise. It should shock none of us. And it doesn't. The president's wave of immigration policies, including deporting scores of deadly and violent criminals to that prison in El Salvador, are leading to a wave of reverse migration. Joining us from Mexico now is the host and co-host of Law and Border right here on RAD, Ben Berkwam, Oscar L. Blue. Guys, great to see you. You know, here you are. You're traveling the world, telling us where you are all the time. You're in Mexico. What's going on? Where are you? What's happening? And what are you doing?
We're in Culiacan, Mexico, in Sinaloa, kind of central Mexico, the hub of where El Chapo came from. And now this is really the epicenter of the war, the Sinaloa War. And we are covering that, the violence down here, showing you the reality of what it is like to live in a cartel-controlled area, and what America would have become had President Trump not won, or still could become if we don't stop these cartels from the cancer from growing into America as it already has begun.
Hey, Oscar, to Ben's point, the New York Post is reporting that the Trump administration has made 113,000 arrests and even deported more than 100,000 illegals since President Trump's January 20th inauguration. In fact, to kind of put all this into perspective, take a look at this graphic, which shows that illegal border crossings have dropped to just 7,000, which is a 94% decrease from last March when 137,000 illegals crossed. So the question to you, Oscar, is this all because of the Trump effect? Are we seeing, and are you even hearing and talking to people in the various countries where we're seeing a lot of these illegals coming from, that they're saying, well, President Trump has really discouraged us from even trying to come across the border. We know it's a new day in America.
It's a various reasons. The Trump effect, not only to Mexico, applying the threat of a tariff, designating the cartels as terrorists, like right here in Culiacan, designating these vicious groups that they have terrorized, the country of Mexico. But also what has happened is that because of the Trump effect and securing the border, in the Darien Gap, it has decreased 98% of the people that they have crossed, through that treacherous jungle. It is, it's an effect that has completely slowed down the pace all over the continent of America. So it's not only at the borders with the United States that is what's the most important thing for the American people, but it has caused a decrease of flow all the way to the south of the continent of America. So yes, it has decreased the level of crossings, illegal crossings into the United States. And also they deployed the National Guard to open border gaps, the Mexican National Guard to open border gaps. That also President Trump pushed the Mexican president to deploy more than 10,000, National Guardsmen of Mexico to open border gaps to decrease the level of trafficking into the United States.
Those National Guardsmen, so important. Ben, I want to ask you about a Pennsylvania bill which cleared the state Senate on Monday. This is unbelievable. It would notify the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, or ICE, when a non-citizen becomes a criminal defendant. The one-page bill was inspired by the murder of 22-year-old Laken Riley, a Georgia nursing student who was killed by an illegal last year while out on a jog. It's being hailed as common sense legislation. Senator Wayne Langerholt Jr. says if you're in our country illegally and you violate the laws, you will be held accountable. What do you think will happen if more states actually pass bills like this?
Well, it's pretty obvious. The word is right. It's common sense. There will be less crime. If you hold people accountable, if you hold criminals accountable, there will be less crime. And the sad reality is you got, Pennsylvania looking at doing this. God bless them. I pray they actually get it through. But the other states, the ones that are the problem are the sanctuary states like California, where not only do they not report this, but if a law enforcement officer knows they apprehended an illegal and they inform ICE, that law enforcement officer can be held accountable. They will actually prosecute the law enforcement officer for violating that illegal's civil rights in places like California. So it should happen all across the country. It's a no-brainer. It's common sense. And if we were to do that every single time an illegal alien got picked up by a police officer, they should be deported. That's common sense. Unfortunately, the sanctuary jurisdictions aren't going to do that. And that's the biggest problem we have right now. Judges that are protecting illegals and sanctuary jurisdictions that are protecting the illegals. And ultimately, they're protecting the cartels, which is what we're exposing down here. And if we allow that to continue, we'll have the same lawlessness that you see down in Mexico. But again, back to Pennsylvania, God bless them. Every state should do that.
Ben, I want to follow up on that question. So what do you think is going to happen in the near future if some states are enforcing these policies and others are not? What happens there?
Well, you get more illegals going to the states that aren't enforcing. You get less illegals in the states that are enforcing. So the states that are enforcing become safer. The states that aren't enforcing become more dangerous. And you get a perfect example. It will be a scientific model of what you have when you have law enforcement and when you don't have law enforcement. And so some places will be safer and some places won't. Well, we're going to have a divided America where you have no equal protection under the law because you don't have law enforcement that's actually doing their job to protect citizens equally over people that have no right to be in our country in the first place.
Hey, Oscar, one last thing for you. If obviously, if you need more proof that Trump's border policies are working, and I know you both know that already, but look no further than acting chief patrol agent of San Diego, the San Diego sector, Jeffrey Stolnaker. He says that staying there's been a dramatic change, and that would be an understatement. According to the LA Times, arrests in San Diego have gone from more than 1,200 a day to only like 30 to 40 per day. He says the president's federal actions, like adding barbed wire, U.S. troops to the borders, making America safe again. Oscar, my question specifically, though, is on the caravans down in Mexico. We heard so many caravans coming to the United States under word salad border czar Kamala Harris and Biden, and now we don't hear anything, obviously. So how do those caravans get going down there? And have you heard any talk? I'm assuming there's going to be no more caravans anytime soon, but how does that happen? How does that germinate down there? How does that start? And have you heard anything about that?
Well, it has decreased. As recent Donald Trump came into office, there has been no caravans that have been built and made in the south border of Tapachula because the incentive is not there anymore. The Democrats are not there. Biden is not there incentivizing people to cross illegally and illicitly to the United States of America. And that has caused an effect, direct effect, to the cartels. That's the number one thing, that the cartels now, Donald Trump is hitting them directly into the pockets, and it has drifted the cartels to go back to their trafficking of synthetic drugs, to trafficking of fentanyl. This is why Donald Trump has pushed Mexico to ultimately to a 25% tariff because of the enormous trafficking of fentanyl. The trafficking of humans has completely decreased. Guatemala has been pushed also to send their National Guard into their borders to secure their borders with Mexico to decrease the level of trafficking and to decrease the level of crossings illegally into Mexico.
Yeah, Ben, Oscar, really appreciate your time. And not only does our audience appreciate you, but just a quick note. I mean, you're on the road all the time. It's a sacrifice for your families, for you. Yeah. We really appreciate you doing this. It means more to us than you'll know. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Will there be a new investigation into his murder? A hearing on the Hill gave new insight on what may happen next. That's a great tease. But first, the FDA just approved a new drug that will at one time or another help you or a loved one. This medical breakthrough is next as American Sunrise continues on Liberation Day, which would be Humpback Wednesday. Humpback.
early morning picture of New York, New York. The city so sweet, they had to name it twice. The Big Apple and my hometown. Welcome back to American Sunrise. Thank you for joining us. Time now for today's health news, sponsored by the Wellness Company. Under the microscope today, for the first time in nearly 30 years, a new antibiotic to treat urinary tract infections is receiving FDA approval. The new pill from drug maker GSK is now approved to treat women and girls older than 12 with UTIs, the most common infection for females. Doctors say bacteria that commonly causes these infections is becoming increasingly resistant to standard antibiotics, and a new treatment is much needed. Elderly people and men with prostate problems are also prone to UTI infections. And while this new antibiotic is for women, it marks a milestone in development of new UTI treatments. Well, it is a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. There's lots of excitement and optimism about the future. But the reality is there's still a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The truth is that the forces that are responsible for breaking our healthcare system aren't going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. So now, more than ever, you need to be prepared. And that's where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals that you can trust, and their line of prescription medical kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, or the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. From the flu to strep throat, from COVID to the bird flu, from a trip to the beach to a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. Make America healthy again starts at home. Do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/RAV today and order. That's twc.health/RAV and use the promo code RAV to save 10%. Now over to David Brody in Washington, D.C. for our latest from the nation's capital.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. From the deep state, I am reporting here. I'm being mic'd. James Comey is looking at me right now. I see you, James. All right. We've been keeping a close eye on Capitol Hill as the House Oversight Committee's task force on the declassification of federal secrets held its first hearing this week on the flood of newly released documents related to the Kennedy assassination. Lawmakers heard from expert witnesses combing through the fresh evidence. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna opened the hearing criticizing past governments for withholding information on the JFK files. Filmmaker Oliver Stone, who notably was behind that 1991 film JFK, was among those who testified during the hearing, and he called on lawmakers to reopen investigations into Kennedy's killing. Have a look.
I asked the committee to reopen what the Warren Commission failed miserably to complete. I ask you in good faith, outside all political considerations, to reinvestigate the assassination of this President Kennedy from the scene of the crime to the courtroom, which never happened, but which means the chain of custody on the rifle, the bullets, the fingerprints, the autopsy that defies belief, and that if it were a murder, we'd have given to the poorest man dying in a gutter.
All right, let's bring in Matt Crumpton, host of the Solving JFK podcast. Let's bring in Matt Crumpton for more. Matt, what do you think? Do you agree with Oliver Stone that there needs to be further investigation into President Kennedy's assassination? Interesting take.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today. And I do agree with that because here's why. Since we had the Warren Commission, and then we had the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which has only ever been 2 actual investigations. Warren Commission found Oswald alone. House Committee in 1978 found that there was, quote, a probable conspiracy. That's the last investigation. In the 90s, we had all these records get declassified by the Assassination Records Review Board, but we've never had accountability for what we found out. And there's been there's nothing that's a single smoking gun document that says, hey, the CIA killed President Kennedy. But we do know for sure now that the CIA was well aware of Oswald before the assassination. They knew all of his addresses for 4 years before the assassination, and had a 198-page file on him that was on Jim Angleton's desk about a week before the assassination. So the question is it extreme gross incompetence that the CIA has been trying to cover up all these years, or is there something more nefarious going on? And that's why we need to have this discussion. It's crucial for our democracy.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, I know that you were in the hearing yesterday, so you were there. I was watching it live. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And on my end, when I was watching it, I felt the big takeaway was that CIA was somehow involved. And I don't think that I've heard that from across the board. I think it was all four people that were testifying. That seemed to be like the blinking red light. What was your biggest takeaway, or was there any surprise?
I think you're right in terms of just if you're the general public and you don't know a ton about the case and you're watching it, that is the big takeaway. And to be clear, it's not that the CIA was involved in the assassination, the shooting, the killing of President Kennedy. That's, very well may be the case. But what there is hard evidence of is that the CIA was tracking and was aware of Oswald for years before, and including the months and days leading up, and they hid it all these years. My biggest takeaway from yesterday was that we had an opportunity to have a bipartisan hearing. It was sad to see the Democrats just completely lack any interest whatsoever in the substance of the hearing topic, the JFK assassination. I understand people want to be political, but that was really disappointing that all the Democrats have effectively, abandoned their position, which was, to have some intellectual curiosity about this case. You have three lifelong Democrats, Oliver Stone, Jefferson Morley, and Jim DiEugenio. They care, but for some reason, the Democrats on the committee just didn't care at all. That was surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time they were talking, they said, "Hey, I'm not political about this." So it was very interesting. Matt Crumpton, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll be getting some more answers very soon.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. Coming up, Joe Biden's cognitive decline made a Democrat break away from being woke. We'll explain. And later, this is your reminder. April 15th is almost here. It's time to file taxes. If you're not ready, what can you do? Find out. The answer is ahead in just 2 minutes. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. I'm American Sunrise correspondent Emily Finn. Time now to stay awake, not woke, brought to us by the 1775 Coffee Company. You know we try a lot of coffee around here, but 1775 Coffee has quickly become a favorite at Real America's Voice, and here's why. First, it's roasted right here in Florida by folks who actually care about what goes into your cup. Small batches, always fresh, never sitting on a shelf for months. And they're sourcing from small farms in Bolivia, which means it's real coffee. None of that cheap factory-produced stuff that gets churned out by the ton. If you're someone who likes a good dark roast or a smooth medium roast, they've got both. Bold, rich flavor, no bitterness, and definitely no acidity. They also have a mushroom coffee blend. And listen, if you haven't tried that yet, it's not what you think. It tastes like real coffee, but gives you that extra brain boost with 5 functional mushrooms. And if you're a K-Cup drinker, you're covered. Their pods are filled with actual fresh coffee and not powdered junk. So if you're like us and drink coffee every day, make it something good and from a company that shares your values. Just head to 1775coffee.com/RAV and use the code RAV for 10% off your order. Give it a shot. You'll taste and feel the difference. All right, well, now that we are caffeinated, it is time to stay awake, not woke. And who is now awake? Democrat Congressman Seth Moulton. During an interview this week, Moulton seemingly had a change of heart while discussing a new book detailing how the White House is handling challenges with former President Biden's age and declining health, as well as the contingency plans that were in place in case of Biden's death during the 2024 campaign. Moulton says, looking back, he has some regrets. He wishes he would have called for Biden to step aside earlier. Take a look at what he had to say.
I mean, look, I was the third member of Congress, House or Senate, to publicly call for President Biden to step aside. But honestly, I wish I had been the first, and I wish I had done it sooner. I think there's a lot of blame to go around here, but clearly what was going on in the White House was even worse than those of us in Congress knew from what we could see.
Moulton called on Biden to bow out of the 2024 presidential election in early July of last year. That was just weeks before Biden officially ended his campaign. The new book that they were talking about is called Fight: Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, and it takes a deep dive into conversations about former President Biden's mental decline while in office and concerns about his re-election capabilities. Let's bring in Allison, David, and Terrance to discuss. You know, you guys, a part of me is almost infuriated, looking at this book and looking at all of these Democrats now coming out and saying, yeah, we saw the signs, we saw the mental decline. I feel like Republicans the entire time were trying to point this out, and it was just gaslighting from the left. Did you guys feel the same way?
100%. That's my reaction to all of that. This is all about trying to sell the book. And yeah, he came out early on, but just coming out and saying something and really taking very little action, at that point, it falls on deaf ears in my mind. Where's the action behind, all right, this man is not fit to continue on as our candidate. Let's really take some action. Let's really push the envelope. He didn't do that like many other Democrats. And so anything they say now, for me, falls on deaf ears. And it's all, about, okay, we ended up picking a candidate who was pretty bad, and that's why we lost. And it's about making excuses, not really making America better, David.
Yeah, Biden was in power. They didn't want to upset the apple cart, if you will, and forget about Kamala Harris for a second. They just didn't want the controversy. They didn't want any of that. They didn't want to go through it as a party. So they looked the other way. And, it's rich of the Democrats to say Republicans are looking the other way when it comes to some of Trump's actions, when the Democrats were doing the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, specifically, they were doing something far, far worse. And by the way, Republicans aren't doing anything bad to begin with. But Democrats were doing something far worse, which is ignoring literally the mental state of the president of the United States at the time, which would have had serious national security and world implications. It's ridiculous. And by the way, how about some real journalism at the time? Where was it? I mean, Robert Hur came out and said Biden was an elderly man with a poor memory. We have yet to have that audio, the audio from the interview that Robert Hur conducted. We have the transcripts, but audio is different. Merrick Garland was held in contempt of court because he wouldn't release the audio. I think President Trump should release that audio for sure. I think that's something we need to look at. But more than to the point, Why weren't journalists when Robert Hur came out and said he's an elderly man with a poor memory? Right there, even if you don't believe Republicans or MAGA media, you've got Robert Hur in an actual special counsel report saying this, and there was no due diligence by the media because they purposely wanted to keep away from this story. And this idea that they just didn't see it as a bunch of, as we like to say in the 1950s, hogwash. Allison.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look back at the tape, it's not just when Biden was running, okay? It goes back to when he was in his basement, when he was running during COVID.
Yes.
If you look at that tape, I mean, at the time, I was like, how can he be running for office? This is absurd. It's been going on for so long. This is not something that, a couple of weeks before this past presidential election, I should have asked him to step aside. Come on. This is years. And yes, to the point of that Hur tape. Yes, exactly. We need to hear that, not just the transcript, because he said he was an elderly man who couldn't be held accountable. That was our president of the United States.
It's mind-boggling, Allison, absolutely mind-boggling. You bring up a really good point because you're right. This book is focusing on, the end days of his presidency, when he stepped down and when Kamala Harris, was kind of crowned as the Democrat nominee and everything kind of unraveled and fell apart. But you're right. This has been going on for at least 4 years. Back to, to 2019 to 2020 when he was campaigning, it was a massive cover-up from the Democrats. And I think this is not the first time that we're going to be hearing more about it. Thank you so much for the discussion this morning, you guys. Coming up on American Sunrise, how do we know that God exists? Is it because the Bible tells us? More on how the proof begins with a simple question, coming up next on American Sunrise.
God bless the USA.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Welcome back, everybody, to American Sunrise. I'm David Brody. Time now for our moment of faith. It's brought to us every day by Lee Greenwood and the God Bless the USA Bible. In focus today, how do we know God exists? Is it because the Bible tells us so? But wait a minute, don't you have to believe in God to believe the Bible? Isn't that circular reasoning? I mean, Abraham had faith. He believed in God, but he didn't have a Bible. Wasn't written yet. Wow. So many questions. Well, guess what? Join us now with biblical insight and answers into all of this is one of our favorite guests, Jim Moseley. Jim, the author of The Duke of D.C., there he is, also discovering Jesus' disciples and the biographies of Jesus' apostles, ambassadors in chains. Around here, of course, we call Jim the Bible history guy, the Mr. Rogers, the biblical Mr. Rogers, if you will. So, Jim, so how did Abraham know? I mean, how can we know? Talk to us about God existing and how we kind of move through that logically.
Well, yeah, just logically, that's all we really need is logic. The proof begins with a simple question. How did the universe get here? Now, there are only 4 possibilities. 1, the universe doesn't really exist. It's just an illusion. That's Hinduism or Buddhism. Number 2, the universe has always existed. That's pantheism or atheism. Number 3, the universe created itself. That's a common claim in mythology. Or 4, the universe was created. And that's the claim of the Bible. Now, David, can you think of a 5th option? Well, no one else ever has. So let's take these apart. If the universe is an illusion and you're a part of the universe, well, then you must be an illusion. But if you're thinking, then you must exist. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So if even one mind exists, just yours, then the universe can't be an illusion. What about the idea that the universe has always existed? Second law of thermodynamics and all modern science says otherwise. The universe is winding down. It's dying out. If it had been here forever, it would have gone extinct forever ago. So, can the universe have created itself? Well, to do that, it would have to exist before it existed to bring itself into existence. Impossible. Parmenides said, nothing comes from nothing. So we're left with one option. The universe was created. And if it was created, it had a creator. Sherlock Holmes said, eliminate the impossible. Whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. So there's a creator. So now let's ask the same questions about the creator. Is he an illusion? No, because illusions can't create realities. Can he have created himself? No, because then he'd have to exist before he existed to bring himself into existence. Now, was he created by another creator? No, because then we have to ask who is the creator's creator, who is the creator's 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 creator, and so on. It just kicks the can down an infinite road. So what's left? The creator has always existed from eternity past. He's the first cause, not caused, but causing. He's the uncreated creator, the unmoved being, the necessary being. If anything exists, God must exist. He's above time, above nature, and subject to none of it. All things came from him. Nothing came before him. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And that's how we know, without recourse to faith of the Bible, leaning on logic alone, God is a fact.
Well, let's put that in the Smithsonian Hall of Biblical Knowledge, because that was perfect. Thank you, Jim Moseley. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Back with the second hour of American Sunrise in 2 minutes, everybody. Stick around.
Introducing the limited edition God Bless the USA Bible, inspired by Lee Greenwood's hit song and the most recognized patriotic anthem in America, God Bless the USA. The God Bless the USA large print leather-bound King James Bible also contains America's founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and the Pledge of Allegiance, along with a handwritten chorus to Lee Greenwood's song, God Bless the USA. With its large print and slim design, this Bible invites you to explore God's Word anywhere, anytime. The God Bless the USA Bible makes the perfect gift and cherished family heirloom keepsake to pass on to future generations. Designed for an easy reading experience in the trusted King James Version translation, this large print Bible is perfect to take to church, Bible study, work, and for traveling. Order yours today at GodBlessTheUSABible.com.
on the second hour of American Sunrise. One of the most consequential days of President Trump's second term is upon us. Get ready for the major announcement on tariffs. History in the making is here. It's just hours away. We're going to sift through the details. Plus, when will we see that one big, beautiful bill? The latest on the budget reconciliation process and the potential snags ahead. And finally, the results are in on those special elections in Florida and Wisconsin. How did MAGA do? Well, we'll have that and more as the second hour of American Sunrise starts right now. Good morning, America.
Welcome to American Sunrise.
Whether it's culture,
we have breaking news to share with you.
Politics.
President Trump is joining us live now from Florida.
We've got you covered.
This is what it looks like to be a patriot.
We have to protect the American family.
The American dream is still alive.
I'm David Brody.
I'm Terrance.
And I'm Dr. Gina.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second hour of American Sunrise. I'm David Brody, coming to you from D.C. Let's bring in Allison Hans, who's in, of course, West Palm Beach for the vacationing Dr. G. T. Bates in our Denver newsroom. Good morning to both of you. I'll tell you what, here it is. It's Liberation Day, guys. And, you know, the White House said they wanted to originally do this on the first day of April, but of course that's April Fool's Day, and this ain't no joke. This is April 2nd, and here we are back to reality, and we're about to find out what that reality is, Allison, at 4 p.m. Eastern this afternoon.
I am very excited. As I said before, I think this is a patriotic day, and hey, we have not done anything over the past 50 years to help this country in terms of tariffs, and it is time to turn this ship around. There's going to be some bumps, but let's go for it. Let's do something for this country.
And it's going to happen and will be announced at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We, of course, will be watching it here on Real America's Voice. In the meantime, we're also watching what's happening at the Supreme Court as the High Court is set to hear arguments today over locking Planned Parenthood out of Medicaid funding programs. It's all part of a larger push from the Trump administration and Republicans to defund the nonprofit, which is known for performing abortions. The case before the High Court is out of South Carolina. Lawyers for the Palmetto State will argue, quote, taxpayer dollars should not be used to fund facilities that choose to profit off of abortion. Medicaid, which is federally funded, prohibits coverage of abortions in most cases. However, South Carolina argues that Planned Parenthood's government funding to provide birth control, cancer screenings, and other services frees up funds to provide abortions, even if they're not directly tied to money from the federal government. Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri already blocked Planned Parenthood from seeing Medicaid patients, period. Many other Republican states are expected to do the same if the Supreme Court sides with South Carolina. House Republicans have 2 more much-needed votes this morning thanks to wins in Tuesday's special elections in Florida. Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine are headed to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. to join the GOP conference. They're filling seats vacated by Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz, respectively. The wins bolster the Republican majority in the House to 220 to 213. Reacting to the victories on Truth Social, President Trump writing, both Florida House seats have been won big by the Republican candidate. The Trump endorsement, as always, proved far greater than the Democrats' forces of evil. Congratulations to America, he writes. Well, the process of laying off 10,000 workers at U.S. health agencies is underway as the staffers reportedly began receiving dismissal notices on Tuesday. The cuts are happening at several high-profile agencies under the Department of Health and Human Services, including the FDA, the CDC, and the National Institutes of Health. The agencies are the latest targets of the government, or of the Department of Government Efficiency, as it seeks to shrink the size of the federal government and cut spending. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says the cuts are essential to streamlining a bloated economy. So far, the departures have included top officials at the FDA, including the director of the Office of New Drugs, as well as the head of the Center for Tobacco Products Division. That's a quick check of your headlines. Now, let's get you back over to David.
Thank you, T. Bates. All right, President Trump set to make a major announcement on tariffs this afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern. It's what we've been talking about all morning. Reports say that Trump could be prepping 20% tariffs on imports coming into the United States. Other options on the table? There's a lot of them. Here is what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say. Take a look.
American workers and businesses will be put first under President Trump, just as he promised on the campaign trail. The president's historic action tomorrow will improve American competitiveness in every area of industry, reduce our massive trade deficits, and ultimately protect our economic and national security. President Trump's economic vision is rooted in common sense. America will offer companies the lowest taxes, energy costs, regulations if they make their products right here in the United States and hire American workers for the job. It's simple. If you make your product in America, you will pay no tariffs.
All right. Well, for more, let's bring in South Carolina Congressman William Timmons joining us on the show this morning. Congressman, thanks for being with us. We're going to see these details soon, obviously, but are you all in on President Trump's tariff plan? Because there's going to be potential consternation with folks in certain congressional districts.
Absolutely. For decades and decades, our allies and our adversaries have been taking advantage of the U.S. benevolence. It's unsustainable, and we got to get our trade right in order to be an economic powerhouse in the global economy for decades to come. We have to make these changes.
Congressman, how do you see this specifically affecting your state? And I'm thinking of Charleston, which, of course, is a huge port. You guys also get some shipping containers and that kind of thing. Could there potentially be an impact from these tariffs in your state and Charleston?
Yes, there's going to be strain surrounding these decisions, but we cannot continue down this path. I'm doing everything I can to help mitigate the impact of tariffs on businesses in my district and in the state, but we have to make these changes in order to be competitive in the global economy. We cannot continue to be the force that we are for good in the world if we allow everyone to take advantage of the U.S. economy. We have the best economy in the world, and that's not going to last if we continue down this path. So President Trump is appropriately taking steps to hold our adversaries and our allies accountable and put us on an even playing field. That's all that we ask. Again, it's just common sense.
Congressman, I think that's very interesting that you're talking about taking some steps to mitigate any problems that you may see in your state. What are some of the things that you're doing that might inspire other states to do something?
Sure. So again, it's all about the flow of information. The president is making these decisions with the information he has. So when a decision that is made is impacting my district in a certain way, I make sure that I reach out to the White House, reach out to the president's team, and make sure that he understands the impact of the decisions. And, it's important to realize we have some huge investment from Michelin and BMW and Boeing and all of these companies in South Carolina. And the number of jobs that they create because of that investment. I mean, the BMW manufacturing facility in my district is the largest exporter of vehicles in the country. They make 450,000 BMWs in my district. They employ 13,000 people directly, but their suppliers nearby employ another 40 to 50,000 people. So that's 50, 60,000 incredible paying jobs that is the lifeblood of my district. So when decisions are made that adversely impacts their ability to compete, it's my job to relay that information. But again, they're doing everything that they need to do to be competitive, and we're only going to make them more competitive. And that's the whole point of this.
Congressman, we hear these three words all the time when it comes to the tariffs: short-term pain, short-term pain, short-term pain. What does that mean? I mean, when I say what does that mean, like, what does short-term mean? 6 months? A year? Year and a half? I mean, how long do you let this go on?
I think it's important to realize that the president's using tariffs for different reasons with different countries, allies and adversaries. So with Canada and Mexico, the biggest purpose out the gate was to get them to secure their side of the border, to stop the flow of fentanyl across the border, and to save American lives. And yes, that had some initial pain, but 100,000 Americans a year die from fentanyl overdoses, whatever that pain is well worth it. And Mexico and Canada are taking steps to address our concerns, and I think that we're moving in the right direction. Now, China's a different story. We're going to hold them accountable long term because they subsidize their businesses, they cheat, they steal intellectual property, and they circumvent trade barriers to try to gain an advantage. So we need to use tariffs long term with them. That's not going to be short term. That's going to be around for a while. And last but certainly not least, Europe. The European economy has been taking advantage of the U.S. economy for decades, and we cannot continue down this path. And I think that that's going to be a little bit, let's say 6 to 18 months. But, all these different uses of tariffs with different parts of the world have a different purpose. So today is going to be about the Liberation Day, and this is yet another layer of tariffs to just make sure that people aren't taking advantage of us. And again, there's tariffs used for so many different things. It's important to realize that the purpose they're being used for, and that dictates how long it'll be.
Congressman, let's talk dollars and cents real quick. The White House is basically projecting that these tariffs will bring about $600 billion annually. I'd like to localize that a bit to South Carolina, or even specifically your district. Have you already projected the potential benefit dollars and cents wise for your community, for your district, or even the state? And I'm glad you brought up BMW there in the Greenville area. I hadn't even thought of that, but that's a huge industry that could be affected.
Yeah, so obviously it's going to take time for businesses to relocate supply chains. It's going to take time for businesses to increase their manufacturing base. And, the U.S. economy is going to transform because of this. And again, there is going to be an adjustment period, but businesses will adjust, and we will become competitive again in the global economy as opposed to exporting all of our jobs overseas. Look, BMW is a success story, but let's go back 50 years. The South was the largest textile manufacturing area in the world, and we were decimated by policies that came out of Washington regarding environment and labor. And all of those policies were well-intentioned, and we needed to do them. But the result was hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs going overseas. And our economy was decimated because of trade, because of the globalized economy. So here we are, and it's come full circle. We're going to be able to invest in textile manufacturing. We're going to be able to cut and sew garments because we're not going to allow China to subsidize their labor, to use slave labor, to destroy their environment, to get an advantage in the global economy. It's as simple as that. This is just common sense. It's long overdue. And yes, there's an adjustment period, but it'll save our country for generations to come.
Yeah, and let's be clear. I mean, President Trump is the art of the deal guy. I mean, so this is all about leverage and, getting some sort of fair deal, maybe a compromise down the road. Congressman Timmons, great to have you with us. Thanks for the no-nonsense talk. We appreciate it.
Great perspective.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Coming up, tariffs, trade wars, more from economist Steve Moore. He is going to be here to dissect the potential future impact of President Trump's big Liberation Day plans. First, though, tax day right around the corner. Some tips on dealing with the IRS. We have that next. American Sunrise returning in a moment.
Welcome back to American Sunrise. So good to have you along for the ride on this Wednesday. I'm Terrance Bates. Well, folks, it is time to drain the swamp, and this morning we're flushing out the IRS. We're now less than 2 weeks away from tax day. In fact, the IRS is now gearing up for collection season. So, what can you do to get ahead? For more, let's bring in the spokesperson for Tax Network USA, Cameron Kinsey. Cameron, it is always good to see you. It's even better to see you knowing that April 15th is fast approaching. So I'm curious what some of the common questions are that you guys are getting there at Tax Network USA with just a couple of weeks left before tax day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Terrance. And this is going to be a great discussion. As you know, the filing deadline's on April 15th. We have been getting an influx of calls from people with various types of cases that we're looking at, not just help with taxes, but let's say there's a looming audit and things like that, letters in the mail that they've been ignoring. How can they approach this? And that's really where Tax Network USA comes in and stands out with its no-nonsense approach to tax relief. We are all on the same side here, I like to say, at Tax Network USA. We've seen the government overreach on the rise, especially when it comes to the IRS. So unlike providers who might nickel and dime you, we offer transparency during this process. We stay with you every single step of the way during your case, and we lay out the payment options catered to your needs. We have experts at Tax Network USA, CPAs, licensed officials, tax attorneys who really know the inside out the tax law and the tax code, people who have been battling the IRS for years. So again, like I said, with the government overreach on the rise and during this tax season especially, it's very important to get ahead of it.
Cameron, I suspect most of the people who come to you expect to owe the IRS or expect to have to deal with the IRS in some other way other than collecting a check from the IRS. So if they're coming to you now, should the whole idea be let's file for an extension to give us a little bit more time?
Yeah, it really just depends. That's a great question. It depends on the complexity of your case. It depends on what you're looking for and the kind of needs that you have during this tax season, because any case that we've had, it can take anywhere from several weeks to several months. You can file an extension if that's right for you, but I would just recommend calling the individuals at Tax Network USA, 1-800-905-8000. You get a free consultation when you call, or you can fill out a form online, tnusa.com/RAV. And they'll actually be able to give you a better insight into your case once you explain it.
And one of the things that makes Tax Network USA unique, and I only know this because you and I have talked so often, is that your advisors actually have relationships with IRS agents, so they can go directly to those agents and be a buffer for their customers.
Yes, absolutely. We basically, like I've said to you before, act as a liaison between you and the IRS, so you're not waiting on hold with them. We have established those relationships as well. And with you, we craft personalized plans for you, whether it's slashing debt through an offer in compromise or setting up affordable payments for you during this tax season. We're not just trying to get money out of you. We already know the IRS is going to do that, so we just kind of want to act as a resource to you during this time. But for conservatives tired of the government overreach that we've seen for the past 4 years in the previous administration, this is really your way to take back control against the IRS. We've saved clients over $1 billion in back taxes, and really our main goal is just to help you during this tax season.
Cameron, before I let you go really quickly, for people who want to contact Tax Network USA, how can they do that?
Yes, you can get started with us at 1-800-905-8000 and talk to somebody from our team directly, or you can fill out a form online. It's tnusa.com/RAV. You'll receive a free consultation. They'll dive into your case, whether it's unpaid taxes, a looming audit. They'll give you a game plan pretty quickly.
Wow. When you say audit, the words alone frighten me. Definitely never want to be dealing with the IRS in an audit. Cameron Kinsey, always good to talk to you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Terrance. Good to see you.
You as well. Folks, coming up here on American Sunrise, President Trump's economic approval rating is slipping. So what does he need to do in order to change the numbers? We'll take a look next here on American Sunrise. Day, but on the markets, it might be called Trepidation Day. Pre-market trading not looking so hot. All of the major indices are in the red right now, and it's likely due to some of the uncertainty about the upcoming tariffs from President Trump. We'll, of course, take you to Wall Street for the opening bell here in just a little bit. There you see it. The Dow is down. The S&P 500 is down, as is the NASDAQ. Gold and silver are up, but crude oil is down again. These are pre-market figures. We'll take you to Wall Street for the opening bell here shortly, though, and we'll see how the day pans out. But now, let's get you over to David. David, by the way, I took your phrase there, Trepidation Day from Liberation Day.
Yes.
A great turn of phrase. I appreciate it. I stole it, so I am now giving you credit for it.
Well, feel free to use it anytime you like, free of charge, though that lasts for a week. And then after that, I will be charging you. So thank you, Terrance. I appreciate that. All right, bro. President Trump reportedly drafting a proposal calling for a 20% tariff on most of the imports coming into the United States. We'll see if that develops later today. The Washington Post reports that several options are on the table. Trump's team weighing a different tariff rate, possibly for individual countries. Trump has said today, as we've said all along, is Liberation Day, and we're going to know what comes from his tariff decisions today at 4 p.m. Eastern. What can we expect? Oh, let's go to Stephen Moore, the economist, the former Trump advisor, the guy that knows it all. Steve, what do you think? How do you see tariffs helping, hurting the economy? 20%? Who knows what he's going to do? Good luck, and God bless you. What do you got?
Hi, David. Well, good morning. And I don't know it all because I don't exactly know what's going to happen at that speech. I think it's at 4 o'clock this afternoon in the Rose Garden. So I'll be eagerly watching that just as you will. But I think that your reports are pretty accurate, that it will be an across-the-board tariff. The president, by the way, tariffs are taxes, so Americans will pay certainly some of that burden of the tariffs. But Trump, having been around him a lot and talked to him a lot about trade, he really believes that this is a way to force other countries to lower their tariffs. This is what he means by reciprocal tariffs, meaning, it is a truism that we have the lowest tariffs in the world, David. So we're down at about 2 or 3%. A lot of other countries are at a 10 and 15 and 20%. And he regards that as unfair. It's not a level playing field, and he's right. And so, as you know, I'm a free trader. I believe free trade is the best outcome here. And what we all hope for is that these other countries start playing by the rules, give us a level playing field, and other countries start lowering their tariffs, which would make everyone better off. But it could be some rough sledding to get to that point.
Yeah, rough sledding. We've heard short-term pain. The question is how long and what kind of appetite do the American people have for short-term pain? Is that 6 months, a year, longer? We'll see. President Trump, by the way, could need some help on that perception of how he's handling the overall economy. So according to a new CBS News YouGov poll, Steve, 64% of people say Trump is not focused enough on lowering prices. 31% say it's about right. 5% say he's focusing on that actually too much. The numbers, by the way, Steve, almost the exact opposite on tariffs. The poll saying 55% of people say Trump is too focused on tariffs. What do you think? I mean, there's a perception issue that goes along with this. There's always a PR aspect to it.
Well, I'm in that 59% that thinks he's been too focused of late on tariffs. And look, he ran on this. He told the American people this is what he was going to do. So we shouldn't be too surprised by it. But what I've advised the president and his advisors to do is, well, let me put it like this, David. In the last month, how often have you heard him talk about the tax cut package?
No, nothing.
Not much. It's all been tariffs. And I think that's off message, frankly. We've got to get this tax cut done. It is absolutely essential, or else the average family is going to face a $3,000 tax increase next year. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff that unifies all Republicans. We're all in favor of making the Trump tax cuts permanent. The tariff issue is more divisive. I mean, you could talk to, people like me and others, and we're going to have different opinions about what the best strategy is. But, David, we all agree that Trump's tax cut was extremely beneficial to the economy. It was good for our small businesses, our families, our large companies. It brought a lot of money back to the United States. So, and by the way, there was another major story in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend that kind of got overshadowed by the tariffs, saying that Trump has deregulated in his first 3 months more than any other president in history. Well, that's a pretty cool story. I mean, that's huge savings, but it's being overshadowed by the constant talk about tariffs.
Yeah, Steve, such great points. Really appreciate your expertise on this. We'll see what he does. 4 p.m. Eastern today. Really appreciate your time, Steve. Thank you. Yes, so will I. So will a lot of folks, for sure. We'll see if it turns into the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930, because if it does, that's probably not a good thing. That had a problem. There was a lot of problems with global trade and obviously coming into the 1930s with the Depression. Thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate it. All right. You bet. Let's go to Terrance in Denver for the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange. The anticipation is building. It's sponsored by AMAC.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.
The uncertainty about President Trump's tariffs at the moment is impacting the markets, particularly in pre-market trading. It's likely going to last at least through the close of business today. In fact, President Trump's speech on the tariffs is happening once the U.S. markets close at 4 o'clock. Smart Shop self-storage, is at the podium today. The applause is underway, which means we are moments away from the markets officially opening and the bell ringing. There you hear it, ladies and gentlemen. The bell is ringing, which means the markets are now officially open, and still no major change there on the markets right now. The Dow is down, the S&P 500 also down. As you can see, the NASDAQ, which is a tech-heavy index, it is down well over a full percentage point. So that gives you an idea of where things stand at the moment. Gold, silver are up. Crude oil, however, is down. Many experts say that gold is a great hedge against the economy and against the markets in general. So right now, if you are considering an investment, you may want to consider gold. Tariff wars, recession fears, and stubborn inflation. No wonder, as I just mentioned, gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. In volatile markets like right now, don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. Instead, take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many Americans today are turning to the Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands to convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. So is it time for you to hedge against inflation and economic instability with gold? Well, if you'd like to learn how to own physical gold in tax-sheltered accounts, text the word America to the number 989898. The Birch Gold Group will send you a free, no-obligation information kit. Again, text the word America to the number 989898. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, so many Americans trust the Birch Gold Group to help them protect their savings with gold. And you can as well. It took decades to get into this tangled mess that we're currently in. So how long is it going to take to get out of it, and at what cost? In order to find out, or at least find out how you can get out of it, text the word America to the number 989898. Do so today. Still to come here on American Sunrise, liberal comedian Bill Maher calls to defund PBS and NPR. So what did he say about their leadership? We'll have his comments next here on American Sunrise.
Welcome back to American Sunrise. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. We invite you to join the conversation on Getter and Rumble. Time now to take the political pulse of America. The beat today, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker to the Senate floor for a marathon filibustering speech. Here is one of the highlights.
Artifice that I've ever seen to obscure the truth in America, that what the Republicans are trying to do is cut massively into health care for Americans in order to give tax cuts to the wealthiest, disproportionately to the wealthiest who don't need it, and to drive up the deficits, making our children and our children's children have a more dangerous economy and higher debt payments to make, debt payments that will skyrocket higher than any expense the government makes. We are literally about to see something go through reconciliation that threatens to sacrifice our children's future so the richest of the rich can get richer. And so I know there's a lot of people who are angry, who are worried, who are feeling overwhelmed, who are struggling to make ends meet, but I know of only one way to do this, and I'm trying to do it myself, is to do things differently, to stand up, to speak up, to not act like this is just normal in our country.
And let's bring in David and Terrance for more. Okay, gentlemen. First of all, if we're going to start at a baseline here, what he just said was a lie.
Thank you.
That was a lie. So That's the very beginning. That's why I really appreciate what the Doge guys are doing right now. All those guys going out there and very much in plain English explaining what they're doing, because they're trying to make the country better. And when you have someone like Cory Booker go up there on the Senate floor and say such lies, the only way that you can combat that is if you have someone on the other side giving the truth. David.
Yes. I mean, Allison, thank you for saying that. You're absolutely right. He's talking about Medicare and future generations and that no, they're doing the exact opposite. I mean, that's the whole point of this. The whole point is to reduce the national debt and deficit. The point is that to not saddle our kids and grandkids with the foot the bill in decades to come. They're doing the exact opposite. And it's really rich of Cory Booker to spend 25 hours doing what exactly? Rallying against waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, rallying against a Trump mandate. I mean, this is a guy that just spent 25 hours without sitting down, which, by the way, good for him from a physical standpoint, but not a mental one, because he went ahead and he spent 25 hours rallying against a president that has a mandate from the American people. And by the way, not a mandate because he won all the swing states, and not a mandate because he won 300 plus electoral votes. He has a mandate because in every single state except for one, President Trump increased his vote total, including in liberal states like California, New York, Maryland, and we can go on. So give me a break. This is about 2028. It's not even about the Senate Minority Leader stuff. I said that yesterday. That's true in a small micro sense. It's about the macro here. He wants to be the de facto leader of a leaderless party, and he wants to be the nominee in 2028. And T. Bates, that's what this is all about. Bottom line.
Yeah, historically, it seems to me that many of these marathon filibusters, and I guess technically this wasn't a filibuster since he wasn't necessarily trying to stop any legislation or anything like this, but these sorts of marathon speeches in the well of the Senate tend to be misguided. It brings to mind for me Strom Thurmond. He, of course, is the one person that many people know who before this I think had the record, and of course he was railing against segregation, or railing for segregation, railing against desegregation, and that obviously fell flat on its face. And history showed that he was on the wrong side of history. And very well, in this particular case, while it's an historic rant, if you will, from Cory Booker, he may ultimately be shown to be on the wrong side of history as well with his thoughts.
Yeah, it may be a rant, but we just cannot forget that this is a senator who went on the Hill and is telling lies. And there are people out there who are going to hear this and they're going to say, well, Senator Booker said it. And they're going to think that that is the truth. That just makes me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, let's move on. And besides the fact that he has crazy eyes, I would have crazy eyes after, however, 20-something hours, I would have crazy eyes too. But he has crazy eyes from the beginning. Okay, we're moving on. Maine says they won't comply with President Trump's executive order on banning transgender women in women's sports. The Department of Health and Human Services said the state is now in violation of Title IX because of this decision. And now there is an ongoing federal investigation going on into the matter. How dangerous is this decision by the state of Maine? For more, let's bring in journalist and former Division I athlete, Ashley Brassfield. Ashley, good morning to you.
Hey,
good morning to you. How are you guys?
Well, Ashley, as a former D1 athlete, how do you feel about Maine not complying with this executive order?
Yes, well, this has been an ongoing battle for a few weeks now. We saw at the governor's luncheon, President Trump actually call out the governor in front of every other governor in the room, stating that you need to comply with the executive order that he signed. And this is just one of these many states that are not complying with that executive order. Of course, we see Gavin Newsom, where Linda McMahon actually had to send a letter out to that state. And they've been given 10 days to comply with this order. We're seeing girls suffering on the daily with their opportunities and benefits and being physically harmed due to transgender athletes being put into women's sports. It's absolutely absurd. And over 70% of Americans agree that transgender athletes should not be in women's and girls' sports. And just in the state alone of Maine, it's 64% of the population that states that they also should not be in women's sports.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who called out the legacy media for defending criminal illegal aliens and slamming the Trump administration's deportation efforts. If you happen to miss it, here's what she had to say, and we'll talk then.
This is a vicious gang, and I wish that the media would spend just a second of the same time you have spent trying to litigate each and every individual of this gang who has been deported from our country as the innocent Americans whose lives have been lost at the hands of these brutal criminals. We maintain our position, and very strongly so.
So, Ashley, I'm curious what you make of the legacy media on this particular issue.
Yes, well, the concentration of defending this man who they state is a father of children that was deported to El Salvador wrongly, it's totally false. It's, improper to say that, he had no ties to the gang MS-13, which honestly, the vice president posted on X yesterday with documentation of court cases in the previous Trump administration stating that, he was affiliated with the gang. He had gang memorabilia and tattoos on his body, as well as there being a clothing items that key to gang related just attire in general. So it's really incredible to see the legacy media and the mainstream media defend these gang members and not the women that are being harmed and the American citizens. And I think Stephen Miller said a great point last night, as well as Caroline Leavitt yesterday, in stating that they do not deserve due process. They are not American citizens. They entered this country illegally in the first place. It's totally absurd to say that we need to spend $1 million on a trial for these illegal aliens that have no respect for the country in general. And we see this on a daily basis where we had to see the administration for the past 4 years let in these illegal aliens and violent illegal aliens into this country and now this administration is having to clean up the mess and get them out.
Definitely. Hey, Ashley, while we're speaking about liberals, let's talk about liberal comedian Bill Maher. He's had some red pill moments, obviously, and he had another one the other day. He actually slammed NPR and PBS for basically calling for them to be defunded. Take a look at this.
The heads of NPR and PBS testified before Congress this week amid accusations of liberal bias. Should the government continue to send taxpayer dollars to public broadcasters? Well, a little background here. I mean, they've been after them the Republicans have wanted to get rid of PBS for as long as I can remember. This crowd will probably do it. I mean, I also read my namesake, Catherine Marr, was head of NPR, and she said, "We're completely unbiased. Give me a break, lady." I mean, they're crazy far left. So, I mean, I think we're past the age, really, where the government, first of all, why do we need to subsidize? Why can't we have outlets like this? And we're so polarized. These outlets became popular at a time when Republicans and Democrats didn't hate each other and weren't at each other's throats.
Ashley, your take on Bill Maher's take.
Yeah, give me a break is my exact response as well. We saw Catherine Marr go before the DOJ subcommittee in front of Marjorie Taylor Greene and many others, stating that the NPR is completely non-biased. Well, her remarks that were pointed out by Representative Gillis of Texas, stating America is addicted to white supremacy, and Tim Burchett even pointing out that she was calling the president a fascist back in 2020. And this leadership stems way beyond this. We actually saw a whistleblower piece stated by Yuri Berliner, who was a 25-year veteran of NPR, and he states that here's how we lost America's trust in the article. And he goes line by line. Beginning in 2016 is where he really saw changes personally. And it's important to note he did not vote for President Trump twice. And this article was written in April of last year. And he states circumstances where NPR got the story wrong. He's stating the Hunter Biden laptop story, Russiagate, as well as the COVID lab leak theory, where they completely denied it at NPR. And he also saw DEI practices being implemented where in $1 million of funding, federal funding, was put into place to implement those DEI policies. It's truly incredible to say that NPR is unbiased, especially from Catherine Marr, but especially hearing that from Bill Maher, which I do think it is quite funny. They have the same namesake, but you're right. Bill Maher has had some red pill moments. And of course, we saw him actually visit the president in the Oval Office, and I would call it the Lion's Den. He was accompanied, of course, by Kid Rock and Dana White. But we are seeing this, common sense come into Bill Maher's commentary a lot more recently.
I'm all for common sense, so I appreciate that from Bill Maher. Thank you, Ashley, so much for coming in this morning.
Thanks,
Coming up, who knew what and when it came to Joe Biden's mental decline? We take a look next on American Sunrise.
Let's spill some tea.
All right, let's spill some tea, sponsored by Artillery Tea Company. Make sure to go to artilleryteaco.com and use the promo code America's Tea for 25% off your first order. Artillery Tea is all natural, whole leaf. The tea bags are chemical free, and each tea bag can be used twice. Artillery Tea Company is family and veteran owned and operated, and a portion of your purchase goes to help veteran and first responder charities. That website is artilleryteaco.com, and make sure you use the promo code America's Tea for 25% off your first order. Time to spill some tea, and in the cup today, a new book is going into detail on the massive cover-up from Democrats on former President Joe Biden's mental decline. During a recent interview while promoting her new book, Fight, Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House, The Hill's senior political correspondent Amy Parnes says she believes every Democrat saw signs of the former president's cognitive struggles. In fact, at one point, he completely forgot who Congressman Eric Swalwell was, making for a very awkward moment at a political event. Take a look.
I think every Democrat has a story, and we talk about some of that in here, where they saw President Biden not in the best terms. We detail, for instance, Congressman Swalwell, who was there looking at him. They came face to face at a congressional picnic, and the congressman had to cue Biden as to who he was. This is someone who ran against him in 2020. He's very vocal. He's out there. Someone like President Biden, in Biden's heydays, he would know who he was. He didn't know. We have other details in the book about a makeup artist coming in on his international trips to kind of prep him before meetings with foreign leaders.
She goes on to say that her book also dives into the contentious decision for Biden to bow out of the 2024 presidential race, making room for former Vice President Kamala Harris to run in his place. Let's bring in Allison, David, and Terrance for more. I mean, how did the Democrats let this happen? I know we were talking about this last hour, you guys. It just truly is infuriating. It's mind-boggling. This is one of the biggest cover-ups in American politics I've ever seen.
I'll just say this. It really comes down to a thirst for power. It goes to show that Democrats, and if we're honest, in a similar situation, I suspect Republicans might do something similar, but it's about a thirst for power. It's about maintaining power and having that authority. And that's what Democrats showed during this last election cycle, is that they would do anything to try to hold on to power at any cost. It wasn't about what was best for the American people. It was about what was best for their party, what they thought would be best for their party. And now it's coming back to bite them.
Emily, I'm still hanging on the what you just mentioned about the makeup artist. The makeup artist? Okay, so the makeup artist comes in and is prepping Biden on national issues and whom he's meeting with. That's absurd.
Yeah, that doesn't seem right at all. She has to remind him, this is Eric Swalwell. I mean, come on, this is the president of the United States. How did we let this happen?
I don't know, David. I mean, you're in the swamp. I have to imagine this book's coming out and you're looking through the back and seeing if your name is somewhere quoted in the book. I don't want to be in this book.
No, though I have to admit my ego goes right to the back of the book every single time. That's 100% true. Look, I mean, also how about the journalists or the Democrats, which is one of the same. But the point is that where are the journalists on this? So here's the problem: they want you to take them seriously, right? We're journalists. We've got the capital J on our chest. But that's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just not true. And so they want to have it both ways. They want you to say, you know, the MAGA folks are the ones with the tinfoil hats. The MAGA folks are the ones that are making stuff up. But the truth of the matter is that's not the case at all. It's these folks that are burying their head in the sand on purpose and not doing the due diligence that they should as journalists. Instead, they spend 24/7 talking about Trump all day long when they should be actually investigating. They should have been investigating this all day long, but they didn't. But I guarantee you, if Donald Trump was in the Biden situation back then, that would have been 24/7, and that just says everything you need to know, Emily.
Yeah, and if you guys remember, after that debate between Biden and Trump, which I think was the turning point for the Democrats, where they realized, okay, we can't run this guy. He's not up to the challenge. He's not going to be able to have the mental capacity to actually make it through the rest of this campaign. But do you remember the left was even trying to say that Trump had mental decline, that he was too old to run. And it's like, you look at the two men and there is such a difference. I mean, it's not even comparable.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, well, great discussion, you guys. Still to come on American Sunrise, you will always find your way back home. We have the touching story of these orangutans heading home next on American Sunrise. Stay with us.
back to American Sunrise. Thanks so much for joining us today. Time now for the Sunny Side Up and In the Pan today. You always find your way back home. Wildlife conservationists are celebrating a rescued orphan orangutan who is now fully rehabilitated and back to her native environment. The Orangutan Project announced one of their most beloved apes, Mary, is officially back home in Borneo after 4 years of therapy to learn how to survive independently in the jungle. The charity rescued Mary when she was just 2 years old, finding her in a small town where villagers were keeping her captive illegally. Now, orangutans are critically endangered, meaning they are at an extremely high risk of extinction. 2 more apes under the Orangutan Project's care, Jojo and Bonti, joined Mary upon her release back into the wild. The charity's founder said all 3 orangutans, quote, confidently and eagerly ventured out into the forest to begin their new life. And I just have to smile when you see those faces. They went together. It was a party. Very cool.
It was.
It's really cool.
Yeah, if I was going to go through something like that, you know, obviously poor Mary had some struggles in her very early life, but she went through rehabilitation and got to enjoy her new life with her besties. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Yes, absolutely. And very cool that they're, I mean, going extinct. They're on the extinct list, or I'm not putting that properly. So to be able to save these creatures is phenomenal.
On a separate note, I like her name. Mary.
Like her name, Mary? Go ahead.
Mary the orangutan. That's kind of interesting. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Terrance. I was just
going to say, am I the only person that's getting ready to go deep diving into orangutans and do some research? Because I didn't realize orangutans were actually apes or part of the ape family. And so I need more clarity. I'm sorry. I'm going to be deep diving into orangutans over the next couple of hours because I really want to know. I want more information about them.
Excuse me, calling our executive producer, Dave Brown. Dave Brown,
That's
can
right.
you please get us some information?
That's a segment. That's a segment.